Over 150 episodes, more than 3,000 dashcam videos, and hundreds of millions of views. Here are the top 150 most viewed dashcam moments from our channel. Buckle up because things are about to get bumpy, starting off with number 150. Morgan was passing a Honda Civic when the driver suddenly turned into the side of his Honda Accord without warning, sending him out of control. After skidding down the road and jumping a curb, Morgan's car slammed into a tree, obliterating both it and his car before he finally came to rest in a motel parking lot. Morgan said the insurance company is taking their sweet time getting him a repair quote, so he's hired a lawyer to make sure everything goes smoothly. Morgan told us that drivers in a college town are expected to be bad, but San Marcos is on another level. I'm just wondering what these two were thinking as they witnessed this Honda on Honda violence. Jeffrey watched a red Mustang sideswipe a white Nissan Leaf, starting a chain reaction that would ultimately involve Jeffrey's Ram 2500 as well. Jeffrey told us that every southbound lane of the highway was shut down by first responders until the wreckage could be cleaned up. Thankfully, nobody was seriously injured in the collision. Kai was driving down a California highway at 4 a.m. Suddenly, even though he was driving over 70 miles per hour, a car flew up behind him and smashed into his car. A responding officer told Kai that he believes the other driver had been traveling at over 100 miles per hour at the moment of impact. He also said he smelled a strong scent of alcohol and proceeded to subject the other driver to a sobriety test. Kai doesn't know what the results of the test were, but he does know the other driver was arrested and taken away in handcuffs. Thankfully, the other driver's insurance provider paid to replace Kai's totaled vehicle. Sometimes a driver can do everything right and still get involved in a collision that isn't their fault. Donnie was driving a van down a highway when a vehicle ahead of him lost control and turned sideways, blocking his lane. With another van in the lane to his right, Donnie had no choice but to collide with both vehicles as his own van struggled to slow down in the rain. He told us the driver of the car had fallen asleep before losing control. He got out to check on the driver before first responders arrived. Thankfully, nobody was seriously injured in the collision. Brandon had just dropped off a package at UPS and noticed his friend and coworker on the opposite side of an intersection while they both waited for a fire engine to pass. Watch what happened after the light turned green. A speeding pickup truck ran the red light, taking the front of Brandon's friend's car clean off. The truck was doing at least 60 miles per hour and never attempted to swerve or brake. The car was totaled, and the pickup driver accepted responsibility. Brandon took his friend to the emergency room, but they determined he wasn't seriously injured. Ignacio was headed to college and was waiting at a traffic light when he witnessed a T-bone collision in the intersection ahead of him. It's unclear what color the oncoming SUV's light was, but what is clear is that the driver made an unprotected left turn before colliding with a driver that had sped up to get through their own yellow light. The result was the SUV flipping onto its side and coming to rest against a traffic island. Ignacio provided his dashcam footage to the responding police as bystanders ran to help the drivers. This week's first video comes to us from Scranton, Pennsylvania. A Honda driver pulled out in front of our submitter's Audi A4. Even though he honked and swerved, he wasn't able to avoid a collision. Police responded, and so did the owner of the Honda, who turned out to be the daughter of the elderly woman who'd been driving. She gave her mom a piece of her mind, while the cops gave our submitter a ride home. Angie's son Cameron was heading home from school when another student pulled out in front of him, and he wasn't able to avoid T-boning his Ford Mustang. Cameron's Volvo SC90 was sadly totaled, but thankfully there were no serious injuries. What frustrates Angie is that the Mustang driver couldn't see Cameron coming due to parents parking in a bike lane marked "No parking anytime." Kids make mistakes, we get that. The Mustang driver shouldn't have pulled into the road without knowing if there was traffic coming. That said, shouldn't the adults know better? Even more shocking was the fact that first responders took over 40 minutes to respond to the scene. Angie sent along a shout out for Mr. A teacher who kept Cameron calm until firefighters and police finally showed up. This submitter was driving down a highway in Iowa when a truck driver failed to see a sedan before changing lanes, sending the sedan hurtling across the highway and directly in front of our submitter. Our submitter had no chance to stop in time, slamming into the side of the other car. The other car was totaled, and our submitter's Chevy Bolt EUV sustained $12,000 in damage. The semi-truck was just scratched, according to the submitter. Fortunately, there were no serious injuries. Watch what happened to Mike while he was heading home. Mike had been spending the night at a friend's house and was on his way home on Sunday morning when an SUV driver ran a red light and T-boned his Prius 2 blocks from home. By the time Mike crawled out of the passenger side, the driver of the SUV was out and telling a bystander that Mike had run a red light and nearly killed her. She then filed a claim with her insurance provider saying Mike was at fault. Mike sent her insurance provider, the same provider he uses, a copy of his dashcam footage, and they told him he had nothing to worry about. They paid him enough to replace his 2017 Prius with a brand new 2022 Prius a week later. Mike told us he can't recommend a dashcam enough and that they really are the best investment any vehicle owner can make. Lewis was being followed closely by the driver of a black Honda. As he rounded a curve, the Honda driver took the opportunity to speed around Lewis before losing control. The Honda driver went too fast into the curve and slid into a parked SUV. Lewis stopped to check on the occupants, and neither of them were seriously injured. Lewis called 911, but he told us the police never responded. Instead, 2 tow trucks arrived to take both vehicles away. Evidently, the owner of the SUV wasn't home at the time, but Lewis sent a copy of his dashcam footage to one of their neighbors. Imagine coming home and finding that. Ismail sent us this video from when he was driving in Las Vegas. While waiting at a traffic light, he watched an unmarked law enforcement SUV turn in front of him before it was struck by a Mustang driver running a red light. Oh! Ismail didn't stick around to find out what happened, but I think we can safely assume the officer was not happy with the Mustang driver after he sped through the red light and likely totaled both vehicles. James was on his way to school with 4 passengers on a bright, sunny New York day. Suddenly, the driver of a Honda Civic pulled in front of his Chevy Malibu. Are you serious? The impact was so hard, the Honda was pushed into a Toyota Sienna, making this a 3-car accident. James had been honking his horn when the impact occurred, and the airbag broke his wrist when it went off. The Honda driver was cited for failing to signal. James has no idea why the Honda driver didn't see him, but he assumes the guy was on his phone. Noah was on his way home in San Diego, California in his 2016 Ford Fusion. He'd told his wife to take their 1.5-year-old baby home in her car and he'd meet her there. Suddenly, the driver of a gray Honda Civic turned in front of him at an intersection. Noah was knocked unconscious and the other driver fled the scene. Police responded and Noah was transported to a hospital with only minor injuries. Unfortunately, Noah's Fusion was totaled, but the good news is that the San Diego Police Department caught the Civic driver that same night. Rafal was driving in Bensonville, Illinois. As he was turning from Foster Avenue onto Bussey Road, he pulled up alongside a Tesla Model 3. When Rafal hit the accelerator, so did the driver of the Tesla. The Tesla driver tried to squeeze in front of Rafal, but another car was merging into that lane from the right at the same time. The Tesla driver hit the brakes, but he still ended up impacting the trailer of a semi-truck. Chase was driving his Kia Soul in Portland, Oregon, when the driver of a pickup truck pulling a U-Haul trailer ran a red light, cutting in front of him and leaving him with no time to react or avoid a collision. Chase T-boned the trailer and his airbags deployed in the impact. His car was totaled after first responders had to use the jaws of life to extricate him from the vehicle. Even with this dashcam footage clearly showing that the pickup driver ran a red light, it still took over 6 months for his insurance provider to accept responsibility. Even so, Chase is grateful he had footage proving that the other guy had been the one to run the red light. He told us, "I would recommend anybody driving to get a dashcam." We couldn't agree more. Miles was on his way back to work after a lunch break when another driver pulled in front of him, giving him no opportunity to stop before colliding with them. Miles slammed on the brakes, but his 2013 Ford Fusion lost traction and slid into the back of the Chevy Malibu. The impact rendered his car undrivable, and his smartwatch automatically summoned first responders to the scene. Thanks to Miles' dashcam, the Malibu driver was found responsible for causing the collision. He told us he replaced his beloved Fusion with, get this, a 2015 Ford Fusion. Kyle was driving his 2017 Audi A4 at about 30 miles per hour. As he approached an intersection, his view was obstructed by traffic in the left turn lane, and he assumed those drivers were yielding for oncoming traffic. Actually, traffic had stopped for an ambulance with lights and siren active. Kyle didn't see it until he'd already entered the intersection, and his attempt to brake wasn't enough to prevent a collision. Kyle filed an insurance claim, including his dashcam footage as evidence. When police arrived, they watched his video and chose not to give him a citation. The car was totaled and towed away. Kyle's still waiting to hear who was found to be at fault for the accident, but he wants to know what you think. Let him know in a comment below. This submitter's father is a truck driver in Germany. He was driving down the Autobahn when the box truck in front of him came to a sudden stop without warning. Our submitter's father hadn't left himself enough stopping distance and rear-ended the box truck. His truck was full of cargo at the time. Paramedics responded, and he was taken to a hospital for medical treatment. Sadly, the semi-truck was totaled. The driver of the box truck wasn't injured, and our submitter's father fully recovered from his injuries a few months later. Robert was driving his Jeep Gladiator when he approached a traffic light. The driver on his right had left a gap for an SUV to exit a driveway, so Robert stopped to avoid hitting them. Unfortunately, the driver of a Mustang driving up the turn lane didn't notice the SUV and ran into it even while slamming on the brakes. Robert gave a copy of his dashcam footage to the police. Each driver moved to make room for the other, but Jean-Paul's van lost traction, swerving off the road and rolling over before finally stopping. Jean-Paul was taken to the hospital in an ambulance, but he was able to leave the same day. Unfortunately, his van was totaled. Thankfully, he was able to replace it with a new one. This submitter was a few blocks from work when a trucker made an unprotected left turn across his lane. Our submitter told us he slammed on the brakes, but it wasn't enough to prevent a collision. The warning labels on the tank indicate it's used to transport Class 3 flammable liquids, but we don't know if it was full at the time. Our submitter told us the trucker immediately admitted fault. Sadly, his 2007 Honda Accord was totaled, but he has since made a full physical recovery. Dremden was running errands and enjoying good weather when an oncoming SUV turned across his path, and there was nothing he could do to avoid a collision. Amazingly, this collision happened 100 feet from a fire station, so first responders were on the scene in about 30 seconds. The only injuries sustained were minor, but Dremden found out later the other driver wasn't insured. Sadly, his 2012 Ford Mustang was totaled by the collision, and fixing it would have cost $24,000, which meant it was totaled. Thankfully, his own uninsured motorist coverage paid him $17,000 for the car a week later. After this collision, he upgraded all 3 of his family's vehicles with high-quality front and rear dash cams. He said, "Never leave home without insurance and a dash cam." Kyla was driving her Pontiac Vibe when the driver of a GMC Yukon failed to yield to her at an intersection where he had a stop sign, but she didn't. When the Yukon began crossing the road in front of her, Kyla had no opportunity to stop before slamming into it. Thankfully, firefighters arrived only 4 minutes later to provide aid. What was the Yukon driver's excuse for causing the collision that totaled Kyla's Pontiac? He told the police he didn't see her car approaching, in spite of the clear line of sight he had long before he started across the road. Kyla wanted to take this opportunity to remind our viewers that you shouldn't sit too closely to the steering wheel, as this can cause injury in the event of a collision by preventing proper deployment of the airbag. Brian was headed to pick up a friend from the airport in his Honda CR-Z, but after what we're about to witness, his friend had to call for an Uber instead. While moving at around 65 miles per hour, Brian suddenly encountered debris in the road, but he had no chance to slow down or swerve before running it over. The impact sent his Honda out of control before it slammed into a cement barrier. The car then ricocheted back across the road and hit the barrier on the other side before it finally came to a stop. The multiple extreme impacts totaled the vehicle. Want to know what was in the road that caused this catastrophe? The road debris Brian hit was actually a transmission from some other vehicle. Brian has no idea where it came from, but now he's fighting his own insurance provider after they decided that the wreck was his fault. Brian sent us another video, but thankfully it wasn't nearly as disastrous as this one. We'll catch up with him again later in this episode. Alexander was heading to his parents' house in his pickup truck to help them move. When a van driver brake checked him, he swerved to avoid it before speeding up to beat a yellow light. An oncoming driver in the turn lane didn't see Alexander and turned, T-boning his pickup and sending it into a light pole before rolling over. His truck was totaled in the impact. The other driver was found to be at fault, and his insurance provider paid for Alexander's truck. The accident was so severe that it was even covered by the local news.
One man was taken to the hospital after a crash at 52nd Avenue South and 45th Street South in Fargo. Officers on the scene tell us the pickup was struck by the car at the intersection. They describe the pickup driver's injuries as non-life-threatening despite the massive damage to the vehicle, and they say the driver of the car was not hurt.
However, traffic was slowed for more than an hour as crews worked to get that pickup onto another truck.
Ram was heading into a hospital parking lot when he had an encounter with a very pleasant pickup driver. Ram started turning into an open parking spot when the pickup driver suddenly floored the accelerator in reverse, blocking him from parking. The pickup driver screamed at Ram through his open window, apparently upset because he thought Ram was going to steal his parking spot. He then backed up the rest of the way, nicely overlapping into the spot Ram had actually been planning to use. Clearly, this guy is such a highly skilled driver, the parking lines just don't apply to his compensate mobile. Since Ram possesses a modicum of emotional stability, unlike the other guy, he gladly parked in a different spot and ignored the third-grade insults that had been hurled in his direction. Taylor called 911 to report what he believed was an intoxicated Civic driver. Shortly after he let a state trooper in front of him to follow the Civic, Taylor watched it drift off the road and into a parked vehicle. A drunk driver, a Honda bump, and instant justice? This might be the most wham bam of wham bam moments. Well, it would be, except the Civic driver passed a breathalyzer test. He wasn't drunk and claimed he'd just fallen asleep. Incredibly, the collision ended up involving 4 vehicles in total. The Civic clipped a black VW sedan, then slammed into a Dodge SUV and pushed it into a Ford Focus, which isn't visible in the dashcam footage. Taylor stuck around to give out copies of his footage. He also told us that 2 weeks later, the Civic was still parked in the same place on the side of the road. Jason was on his way to work when he watched a car hauler take an on-ramp too fast before rolling over and dumping 3 pickups onto the highway. Okay, that guy is very fired. Thankfully, Jason was able to slow down and avoid hitting the tipped-over top-heavy truck trailer. Nobody else was pulverized by the plummeting pickup payload either. After verifying that nobody was hurt, aside from the driver's employability that is, Jason continued, but he told us he knew right away he needed to send this footage to Wham Baam Dashcam. Thanks, Jason. Isaiah was driving his Toyota 4Runner and was waiting in a center turn lane when he watched a pickup driver slam into the back of a car that was stopping at a traffic signal. Isaiah stopped and gave a copy of his dashcam footage to the driver of the Hyundai Elantra, who seemed to be okay. He thinks the Toyota Tacoma only needed a new bumper, but that the Hyundai was probably totaled. Today's first video comes to us from a DoorDash driver who was on his way through a construction zone when the driver of an oncoming garbage truck failed to yield before turning across our submitter's lane.
A crash has been detected.
Even though our submitter stood on the brake pedal and held down his horn, he was going 40 miles per hour, and there was no way he could avoid hitting the garbage truck that should have never been in front of him. Our submitter told us the garbage truck driver said he'd thought the road ahead of him was closed, so he'd followed the car ahead of him through the flashing yellow light. Sadly, his Honda Insight was totaled. Even worse, the fast food he was delivering went flying. I'm guessing he didn't get a tip for this delivery. Thankfully, he wasn't seriously injured, and he's planning to use the insurance settlement to upgrade to a Tesla Model 3. Sweet! Watch what happened to David after he pulled up to a stop sign. In before someone leaves a comment about David being rammed by a ram. Subscribe if I just stole your joke. The driver of the black pickup claimed she hadn't seen David's Ford Fusion. Thankfully, nobody was injured, and the two parties were able to resolve the incident without involving any first responders. After sending his dashcam footage to her insurance provider, they accepted responsibility and paid $6,800 to fix David's car. They told him that without the video, they would have assigned him 50% of the blame, and he would have had no evidence to prove otherwise. He told us he has dashcams in all his vehicles, just in case. Check out what happened to Tim as he was headed to school. He was driving his BMW about 45 miles per hour when another driver failed to yield and pulled out in front of him. He was able to get out of his car on his own and disconnect the battery, but bystanders made sure he was rushed to the hospital. He had extensive internal injuries, and he spent a week and a half in the hospital and another 3 months in physical therapy, plus a month of psychotherapy. He received $8,600 for his totaled car and his pain and suffering. He's working on trying to get the car roadworthy again, but in the meantime, he's driving this BMW E39 540i, his dream car. Be careful out there, Tim. We're glad you're okay. Miles was on his way home after picking up some fast food when he watched a pickup truck run a red light and get T-boned by an SUV. Miles told us the light was red for around 7 seconds before a white Chevy Silverado drove out in front of a silver Nissan Rogue, where it was hit on the driver's side and spun completely around. He also told us he saw people getting out of their vehicles after the collision and didn't see that anybody had been injured. He left us with this note: no matter how long your green is, always look both ways for these guys. John was driving his Ford Mustang Mach-E in Huntsville, Alabama. As he approached an intersection on a green light, the woman coming from the right ran her red light. John slammed on the brakes, but he had no chance to stop in time and crashed into the back of the Kia. They filed insurance claims at the scene, and the woman took full responsibility. I guess John's dashcam footage would be hard to argue against. The rear bumper cover of the Kia was torn off, and at first the damage to John's Mach-E didn't look too bad. Unfortunately, John later found out that the shop wouldn't be able to fix it for 3 months due to long wait times on replacement parts. The car is undrivable because the forward-facing sensor is now angled to the side, so the car slams on the emergency brakes whenever another car passes it. John's insurance provider gave him a Dodge Ram 1500, pretty much the opposite of an EV. He's thankful he wasn't going any faster and that he has a dash cam. He also recommends that everyone should invest in a quality dash cam. Melissa was driving to work when her Subaru Crosstrek was rear-ended by the driver of an Infiniti who wasn't paying attention. Melissa's car immediately began notifying emergency services. She then called her fiancé Matt, and he was actually watching a helicopter shot of the accident scene when she called him. Melissa attached the dashcam footage to her insurance claim, and the insurance company paid for her totaled Subaru as well as her medical bills. Losing the Subaru she'd just gotten was upsetting, but Matt was able to find her a replacement and is just glad her injuries weren't any more serious. Rubicon Bob was not driving his Jeep Rubicon when a truck driver failed to yield to his GMC Yukon. With a concrete barrier on his right, Rubicon Bob had nowhere to go to avoid getting clipped by the semi as it rolled through a yield sign without slowing down. He pulled over just down the road and called the police. When officers arrived, the trucker told them Rubicon Bob had shot past her in the turn and was trying to squeeze in front of her. She repeated that story to Rubicon Bob's insurance provider as well as her own. Once he showed his dashcam footage to both insurance companies, they agreed that the trucker was responsible. He told us he'd put 327,000 miles on his GMC Yukon over 16 years, and it was in pristine condition prior to this collision. Sadly, this incident totaled his prized SUV, as repairing it would have cost more than the vehicle was worth. He told us he's an insurance agent and he strongly recommends that all drivers invest in dash cams. Chris was headed to get a haircut when the driver of a Nissan Rogue failed to yield and turned across his lane. Chris stood on the brake pedal, but it wasn't enough. When Chris's 1997 Toyota 4Runner slammed into the Rogue SUV, the impact sent the Toyota onto its side and totaled both vehicles. Chris was able to climb out of his car's sunroof with the help of some bikers who witnessed the crash. Both vehicles had to be towed away, and Chris is sad that his 4Runner was wrecked with the odometer fewer than 4,000 miles away from 500,000 miles. When police arrived, they found the Nissan driver at fault. Chris used the insurance settlement to buy a 2005 4Runner, 8 years newer than the last one. John is a snowplow operator who was working during a winter storm one afternoon. The driver of a Mercury Grand Marquis was driving too fast and spun across the center line and into the path of a pickup truck. The pickup truck hit the Grand Marquis, sending it spinning back across the road. Another vehicle then hit the pickup when the driver was unable to avoid a collision. Finally, a Honda driver, eager to avoid a Honda bump, went up onto the curb rather than rear-end the other vehicle. John stopped and shared his dashcam video with the involved drivers and responding police. Police told John the Grand Marquis driver was confused and didn't even know what direction he'd been going. Firefighters apparently had a hard time extracting him from the vehicle. Mark and his wife were headed down a highway in their Honda CR-V when an oncoming pickup truck lost control before sliding sideways across the median. The pickup slid into their lane, and the wet road surface made it impossible for either vehicle to stop. They slammed into the truck, causing airbags to deploy in both vehicles. 2 occupants were in the pickup truck, and a North Carolina trooper later told Mark that it had slick tires. Amazingly, there were no fatalities resulting from this accident. John was headed to work one morning on I-95. As traffic was merging onto the interstate from the right, John merged left to give the drivers room. Sadly, he wasn't prepared for the driver of a semi-truck to merge twice, and by the time he realized what was happening, it was too late. Once contact was made between John's RAV4 and the truck's tires, the force of the rubber on the side of the SUV held it in place and kept John from steering away. Once he finally broke free, both drivers pulled over. The Florida Highway Patrol responded and cited the trucker for making an unsafe lane change. John is now waiting for a repair estimate, but he's already been told he's not at fault for the collision. Samuel watched a Mustang driver weaving through traffic make a critical error when he tried to thread the needle between an SUV and a pickup driver who didn't see the speeding Mustang and started changing lanes. When the Mustang driver tried to squeeze past the pickup, the 2 vehicles collided. One of the Mustang's tires tore off the rim and went rolling away, while the pickup suffered a flattened tire and major body damage. With the remains of both vehicles scattered across the highway, Samuel joined the drivers on the shoulder to give the pickup driver a copy of his dashcam footage. Thankfully, the flying debris hadn't damaged his Volvo C70. This emitter had left his Ford Explorer parked when it captured a driver pull into traffic, then stop in front of another driver who unfortunately was heading directly toward the sun. Evidently, the driver of the SUV had been delivering food when the collision occurred. Our submitter offered the police a copy of his dashcam video, but they told him it was obvious who was responsible. Our submitter told us he thinks both drivers are at fault, and he asked us to shout out Paul and Samantha. Jaden was headed to a Toyota dealership when his Hyundai Sonata was rear-ended by an SUV, spinning at 90 degrees and ripping off half of the rear bumper cover and a taillight. Jaden asked the dealership for their security footage of the accident, which gives us a much better angle of what happened. The SUV driver started driving away at first, but stopped a few blocks down the road due to deployed airbags. The car was totaled and had to be taken away on a flatbed truck. Jaden and his passengers were transported to the hospital as a precaution, but they were uninjured. The other driver's insurance provider paid Jaden $23,000 for the vehicle and hospital bill, and he replaced his Hyundai with a Mercedes SLK 350 Sport Convertible. Upgrade! Derek had just picked his daughter up from the babysitter's house and was on his way home when he approached a traffic light that had just turned green. Traffic in his lane hadn't started moving yet, so he had to slow to a stop while waiting for the cars in front of him to start moving. That's when he felt an impact.
Oh!
A lady in a Jeep rear-ended him at 45 miles per hour, sending him crashing into the car in front of him. Both Derek and his daughter walked away from the accident without any injuries at all. Unfortunately, the lady driving the car Derek had been pushed into was pregnant, so she requested that an ambulance take her to the hospital just to be safe. The police were called to the scene, and the Jeep driver was found to be 100% at fault. Unfortunately, Derek's car was totaled. Today's first submitter was waiting at a red light when he watched a white Ford Explorer from the right get struck head-on by an SUV from the left that was racing to beat the light. The timing is dubious, but it does appear that the white Ford Explorer entered the intersection while the light was yellow, making that driver's actions legal and giving them the right of way. The driver of the other SUV, on the other hand, definitely entered the intersection at high speed after the light had turned red. Thankfully, our submitter told us both drivers appeared uninjured as he called 911 for them. Jan was out getting lunch for herself and her husband before he went to work. When the light turned green, she started across the intersection, but she never made it to the other side. Jan told us an 81-year-old man ran his red light, T-boning her Chrysler minivan at 60 miles per hour and sending it 500 feet down the road. First responders arrived quickly, and the driver of the... Wait, what is that? Wow, this has got to be the Honda bump to end all Honda bumps. Anyway, the Honda driver told the police that his light had been green, but they pointed out to him that he'd actually had a green right turn arrow. Jan was taken to the hospital where she received treatment for a head injury. The 81-year-old walked away unharmed. Sadly, Jan's van was totaled. The other driver's insurance provider paid Jan and her husband $12,000, and after medical bills and legal fees, they ended up with $5,200, not enough to pay the $6,200 they still owed on the van. David was leaving a UPS store in Long Beach and needed to make a U-turn in the road's center turn lane. A vehicle he hadn't seen before came speeding up the lane behind him, slamming on the brakes and skidding to a stop. David swerved right to give the other vehicle room to stop without hitting him, missing his opportunity to turn in the process. The other driver, now enraged, passed David in the oncoming lane, then brake-checked him. With nowhere to go, David was forced to rear-end the other vehicle. The other driver then got out and began acting as though this was David's fault. Eventually, the other driver admitted to brake-checking David and causing the accident, but only after claiming that David had cut him off. Insurance is currently handling the claim, and David's front bumper cover will need to be replaced. Fortunately, nobody was injured. Oddly enough, it seems like the accident actually helped fix the other guy's car. Neither of his brake lights worked when he brake checked David, but after the collision, one of them started working again. This emitter was headed to a friend's house when an SUV driver turned out onto the road in front of his '99 Accord. Even though he slammed on the brakes, he was unable to avoid T-boning the SUV. Thankfully, nobody was seriously injured in the impact. When police arrived, they found the SUV driver completely responsible. Sadly, the Honda Accord Coupe our submitter had been restoring was totaled in the collision, but he used the insurance settlement to replace it with a newer Accord instead. A white Volkswagen pulled out of a gas station and crossed multiple lanes of traffic in front of Jet. Everything seemed fine until a wild semi-truck appeared. Jet stopped and helped direct traffic while the drivers involved pulled over to exchange information. He asked for a shout-out for his friends Danny and Anthony and his little sister Linda. They watch every episode of Wham Baam Dashcam and Wham Baam Cam. Hey everybody, we hope you're satisfied. Gary was heading home from class when he noticed an SUV ahead of him slowing down to turn. He could tell the SUV would be out of the way before he got there, so he just kept going. Sadly, a different SUV got in the way instead. When the other SUV pulled out in front of Gary, he panicked and tried to swerve around it, but he couldn't avoid a collision. His Volkswagen Jetta spun completely around before landing in a ditch.
Oh, I'm glad I have my camera.
After the impact, Gary sat in shock for a while before reaching for his phone and dialing 911. A passing police officer stopped to check on everyone while Gary was checking on the other driver. It turned out the cop was outside his jurisdiction, so he called a South Carolina Highway Patrol officer to assist. All told, Gary was on the side of the road for 2 hours before he was able to get home. The driver of the SUV was uninsured and his license was suspended as a result of this collision. Sadly, Gary's Jetta was totaled. Molly was driving her 2011 Audi Q5, which she describes as her dream car, when a Chrysler turned across her lane. Molly was unable to avoid a collision that totaled both vehicles. She still misses her Q5, and even though she replaced it with an Audi A4, she told us it's not the same. She plans to get another Q5 someday. Thankfully, after a year of physical therapy, the pain in her back caused by the accident is gone, but she still gets occasional migraines. This emitter was headed home with his wife in the car when he suddenly noticed an oncoming vehicle making straight for them. He managed to turn enough to avoid a head-on collision, but the car still smashed into them. What really sucks is that this happened only 150 feet away from the submitter's house. Missed it by that much. The submitter initially paid about $5,500 to get his car fixed, which took 3 months. After 6 months, the other driver's insurance provider finally paid the submitter for 60% of the repairs. They told him he'd have to get the other 40% from the driver of the red car that had cut the other driver off. After 3 more months, he finally got the rest of the repairs paid for by his own insurance provider. In the accident, one of the submitter's tires was destroyed, and insurance would only pay to replace one, even though tires should always be replaced in pairs. The submitter paid for the second tire out of his own pocket. Ricky was headed to work when she was passed by a reckless Acura driver. Her gut reaction was to slow down, but she had no idea in that moment how bad things were about to get. Ricky is thankful she'd slowed down below the speed limit by the time the Acura spun out and she struck it head-on. Incredibly, nobody was hurt in the collision. The Acura, on the other hand, was totaled. Ricky's Chevy sedan was also lightly damaged by the impact. She told us the Acura driver tried to convince her to let him repair her car himself. But after a week of radio silence, she contacted his insurance provider. You might not be surprised to find out that the Acura driver never reported the collision to his insurance provider, and he even tried to deny that the wreck had happened at all. Thankfully for Ricky, her dash cam doesn't lie. Ethan was headed home from school in his 2006 Mercedes-Benz E500 and had just entered the passing lane to go around a BMW when the Nissan Sentra in front of him rear-ended a truck. Ethan slammed on his brakes, but it wasn't enough. He rear-ended the Sentra, turning this into a 3-car accident. He was slapped with a $250 fine, and his liability-only insurance didn't cover any repairs to his car after he was found to be at fault for the accident. He spent a month rebuilding his car himself in his driveway, using parts from another Mercedes with a blown engine. It still needs paint, but I'd say that's not bad for an 18-year-old fixing his first car. This submitter was driving her Acura in Yonkers, New York, when the driver of an unmarked van made an illegal U-turn across her lane. Unfortunately, the submitter's vehicle was totaled. The driver of the van then took off, turning this accident into a hit and run. The submitter contacted the police, but they had no luck deciphering the license plate number. If you recognize this white, unmarked GMC Savannah or know who it belongs to, please contact us directly, and we'll pass the information along to the submitter. Gene was sitting in a parking lot when he got a front row seat to the demolition of a Subaru BRZ. Somehow the Subaru driver lost control before slamming head-on into a power pole right in front of Gene's Ford Maverick. Incredibly, the driver got out of the car seemingly unhurt after the airbags deployed. By the way, we weren't sure what kind of car this was, so we asked our Patreon supporters over on our Discord server. Huge shout out to them for helping us identify it as a Subaru BRZ. Gene told us he offered his dashcam footage to the responding police, but they never reached out for it. I'm guessing they didn't need it in this case, but not all collisions are so cut and dry, as we'll see later in the video. Nick was heading to the mall when he watched the driver of a black SUV run a red light and get struck by another SUV. The SUV struck the Toyota's rear tire, spinning it around and sending it dangerously close to Nick's Honda Civic. The SUV then rolled into a red SUV that was stopped on the other side of the intersection. Thankfully, nobody was hurt in the collision. All the involved drivers were thankful for copies of Nick's dashcam footage, but the police told him they'd captured the incident with their own camera on a nearby power pole. They weren't interested in Nick's dashcam footage, but they thanked him for offering it and told him about other incidents where dashcam footage had completely changed the outcome of a collision investigation. Advait found out what happens when a speeding convertible loses control on the highway. At over 90 miles per hour, the convertible lost traction before slamming into the back of a box truck. Both vehicles pulled over, but Advait doesn't know what else happened as he wasn't able to stop. Allison was on her way home from work when the driver of an SUV leaving a parking lot headed right across the road in front of her, ignoring a stop sign without even slowing down. Allison hit her brakes a split second before the impact, but by then it was too late. The collision spun her Mazda 6 completely around before her phone automatically called 911. First responders arrived 5 minutes later. When police began investigating, they were confused about what had happened because Allison's car was facing the wrong way. Allison said they thought she was the driver at fault. The other driver went along with this misunderstanding, claiming Allison had run the stop sign and caused the collision. Allison told them she had a dash cam, and after watching the footage, they cited the other driver. Incredibly, nobody was severely injured in this collision, but sadly, Allison's Mazda was totaled. The other driver's insurance company paid her $8,000 for it, enough for a down payment on a new Subaru Outback. She did get taken to a hospital and spent 4 hours in the emergency room before it was determined she wasn't seriously hurt. But that alone turned into $50,000 in medical bills. The insurance company will be paying them too. Allison told us she's subscribed to Wham Baam Dashcam, Tesla Cam, and Security Cam. Thanks, Allison. We're glad you're okay. Harry was driving in heavy rainfall when he went to overtake a semi. Unfortunately, tire spray from the truck was hiding an oncoming vehicle, and Harry had to slam on his brakes to avoid a head-on accident. As he passed the other car, Harry and his passenger both gestured at the driver to keep his headlights on. What a scary situation. Cole was headed to work, and he admits he was speeding about 10 miles per hour over the limit. Suddenly, a pickup truck hidden by the glare of oncoming headlights pulled onto the road in front of him. Cole had no chance to stop, T-boning the pickup truck. His rare Saturn Ion Redline was sent rolling, finally coming to rest on its roof. Unsurprisingly, it was totaled. Cole had to have surgery for a broken wrist and says he's lucky to be alive. Amazingly, he told us the pickup driver's insurance provider is blaming him for the accident and refusing to pay for his claim. He wants to know who you think is at fault and if he should hire an attorney to sue the insurance company. He also wanted to shout out his family for supporting him through this ordeal. David was heading to dinner with his wife when he watched a pickup truck get T-boned by a Scion running a red light. The pickup rolled over and came to rest on its roof after being struck by the white Scion XB, which had actually been sideswiped by another car with a green light before it hit the pickup. David stopped to help, and so did plenty of other drivers. David called 911 before giving copies of his dashcam footage to the involved drivers. Ernie was headed to Costco for dog medicine when an oncoming driver ran a red arrow and turned in front of Ernie as he proceeded through a green light. The T-bone impact rolled Ernie's Toyota 4Runner completely over before it ended up back on its wheels. With his doors stuck and windshield shattered, he ended up climbing out through the rear hatch with the help of a bystander. Ernie filed an insurance claim with his dashcam footage as evidence after responding police officers retrieved his dashcam for him. The other driver's insurance provider accepted liability and cut him a check for $40,000 US. Obviously, his 4Runner was totaled, but he used the insurance settlement to replace it with a new one in the same color, along with an improved dashcam with both front and rear angles. Unsurprisingly, the cops told Ernie that the other driver had claimed Ernie had run a red light, and his dashcam footage made all the difference. If you need a dashcam, we put a link to our recommendation in the description. Jeremy's dad was driving along in his Toyota Highlander. The driver of a white pickup truck was driving distracted, interpret that how you will, before traffic ahead of them came to a stop. The white pickup smashed into the pickup in front of it, pushing it into another pickup, which was then pushed into a sedan. In total, 4 vehicles were involved in this fender bender. Katie was a mile from home after driving for 3 hours. When she entered the turn lane at an intersection, she was shocked to be nose to nose with a Nissan coming the wrong way. She'd been traveling at about 35 miles per hour and had to slam on the brakes to avoid an accident. She could tell that the driver was embarrassed by the mistake. Later, when she watched the dashcam footage, she noticed the Nissan can be seen driving through the intersection, turning early and ending up on the wrong side of the island. Paolo was driving his Subaru when the driver of an Alfa Romeo failed to yield and turned in front of him at an intersection. Paolo hit the brakes and swerved as soon as he noticed the SUV turning in front of him, but he slid into it anyway. Even though he was later diagnosed with a concussion, he managed to call 911. He also received whiplash, and his Subaru was totaled in the impact. His airbags deployed, and he was taken to the emergency room to be x-rayed. Fortunately, no fractures were found. He wanted to thank the Markham Fire Department, York Region Paramedic Services, and the York Regional Police for responding to the scene, and the staff of the Markham Stouffville Hospital for ensuring he was taken care of. Dan was headed home after dropping a friend off one night when he approached and stopped at a red light. As he waited for the light to turn green, he noticed an oncoming vehicle in a turn lane wasn't stopping or turning. The oncoming vehicle proceeded full speed through the red light, smashing head-on into Dan's Lexus GS350. The impact cut power to his dashcam and sent his car careening into another vehicle. Thankfully, Dan wasn't seriously injured, but he told us he briefly lost consciousness after his airbag deployed, and the force of the collision broke his glasses in 2 pieces and embedded one of them between the back seats. He also told us the other driver was very aggressive after the collision and seemed not to realize that he'd done anything wrong. He claimed he'd just gotten off work and was tired. Dan called the police and let them sort it out. Dan has legal representation and is now waiting for the insurance process to be completed while he receives chiropractic treatment for whiplash. Sadly, his Lexus will most likely be totaled. Kenya was heading home from Starbucks when the driver of a blue Hyundai made an illegal U-turn and Kenya wasn't able to avoid hitting her. The other driver fixed her front bumper cover with tape or bungees or whatever that all is before Kenya was able to take a picture of her car. She then refused to take responsibility for causing the collision. Kenya made a police report and is now waiting for a repair estimate. Jordan was driving his BMW 340i in New Jersey when he noticed a dark-colored Acura driving erratically. Check out what happened after Jordan had been following the Acura for a while.
There was just an accident! Bro! Holy I just witnessed a accident! Holy Holy
heard it.
Bro!
I heard it.
Bro! Yo!
I heard it.
Nah, let me get out.
After the Acura drifted across a lane line and struck another vehicle, it crashed into the center divider before ricocheting across the highway and into the guardrail. Jordan stopped and checked on the driver, who asked him who hit who. This leads Jordan to believe he'd either fallen asleep at the wheel or he was driving under the influence. Fortunately, the drivers of both vehicles were okay. Jordan sent his dashcam footage to the driver of the white Corolla. This submitter was on her way home when the driver of the Mustang ahead of her turned across the oncoming lane, failing to yield to a minivan. The impact sent both vehicles spinning before they smashed into a sign. Sarah immediately stopped to check on the occupants, then called 911 after verifying they weren't seriously injured. The 911 operator asked Sarah to stay at the scene until a police officer could collect her dashcam footage. She ended up showing it to several first responders before leaving. By the way, this is Sarah's second time being featured on Wham Baam Dashcam. Her first submission was from a year ago, when a pickup turned and T-boned her Dodge Charger. We'll link to that episode at the end of this one. Antonio was driving down the interstate when a dump truck performed a pit maneuver on his Nissan Sentra. His car spun completely around and the driver of a Mazda Miata was unable to avoid hitting him in the process. Incredibly, the truck driver then drove off, making this a hit and run. His dashcam didn't capture the truck's license plate number, but it did get the name of the trucking company, C.L. Parker Trucking. Unfortunately, Antonio hasn't had any luck getting a hold of the company. His insurance provider totaled his vehicle for $31,000 and he was diagnosed with a severe concussion and has been out of work since the accident. If you know anything about C.L. Parker Trucking, email us and we'll pass it along. Antonio replaced his Sentra with a Honda Civic. Watch out, Tesla Cam, he says. There's another Honda on the street. Tanner was driving his Ford F-150 at 35 miles per hour when the driver of a utility truck suddenly pulled onto the road in front of him, and slamming on the brakes wasn't enough to avoid a T-bone collision. Both drivers pulled into a parking lot to exchange information as police responded. Tanner's F-150 was totaled by the insurance company, but he bought it from them for $1,000 and got it running again himself. This proves that totaled doesn't mean irreparable or worthless. It just means that Tanner wanted to fix it more than the insurance company did. Once he had it running again, he replaced it with a newer F-150 with a crew cab. Theodore was driving when the driver of a box truck ran a stop sign and T-boned his Ford Transit van. Theodore told us the truck driver began accusing him of speeding at over 70 miles per hour. When first responders arrived, Theodore showed them his dashcam footage and they discovered that the truck driver was lying. Theodore told us, "At this point, the dashcam saved me. Advice for everyone, get a dash cam. Insurance paid $13,000 for the van, plus another $700 for damaged cargo. He also pointed out this is his second submission to our channel. His first was featured way back in episode number 7. Peyton was on his way home when he watched a Dodge pickup truck hydroplane and lose control. The truck spun and collided with the median barrier before coming to rest in Peyton's lane, where he had no chance to stop even after slamming on his brakes. The accident did $53,000 in damage to Peyton's 2-month-old truck and the trailer he'd been pulling. At first, the other driver's insurance provider refused to pay for the damage, but after he sent them the dash cam footage, the process went a lot more smoothly. We're kicking things off in a big way today with what might be the worst Tesla behaving badly we've ever seen. Check out what happened when the driver of a Model X didn't check for traffic before turning across lanes. As our submitter, who had the right-of-way, drove down a local road at the speed limit, an oncoming Model X driver turned through a gap without checking for traffic, and our submitter wasn't able to avoid T-boning them. The collision totaled our submitter's Honda Civic, as well as the brand new Model X that still had temporary license plates. And no, this was not a Honda bump, but we've covered this before, so fight about it in the comments. Our submitter told us first responders, including police, firefighters, and paramedics, arrived at the collision scene. But when the police made a report, they recorded the Tesla driver's insurance policy information incorrectly. That fact, combined with the fact that the Model X had temporary plates, means our submitter now has no idea who the Tesla driver was, and is having major issues with his own insurance claim. Here's hoping our submitter is able to get this straightened out. What a headache! And all because a Tesla driver behaved badly by cutting through traffic when the road wasn't clear. Amelia was waiting to turn left at an intersection she told us has been under construction forever. Watch what happened when another driver entered the intersection way too fast and tried to turn right. Amelia's airbags deployed, and the lady driving the Honda Civic called 911 while Amelia was still in shock. First responders arrived quickly thanks in part to the fact that a hospital is right next to this intersection. Both the Civic and Amelia's VW Beetle were totaled and had to be towed away. The Beetle had also been pushed backward into a van, but it only sustained a small scratch on the front bumper cover. Amelia told us that having a dash cam has saved her a lot of time. She also said, "Shout out to all people who don't have a dash cam. Get one as soon as you can. It saved my butt and can save yours." Aaron was approaching a traffic signal when it turned green, and he proceeded through the intersection at about 25 miles per hour. Suddenly, the driver of an oncoming Chevy Impala turned across his lane, and he couldn't avoid a collision. The head-on collision totaled both the Impala and Aaron's Chevy Malibu. Paramedics and sheriff's deputies responded almost immediately after both his vehicle and his phone called 911 automatically. Ironically, the Malibu was actually a rental, as Aaron's Ford Taurus was in the shop for major repairs at the time. He's very thankful he paid for extra rental insurance, although the Impala driver did admit fault at the scene. With no time to react, Dave collided with the rear door of the gray Honda Accord. Police responded to the scene and cited the Honda driver. Both vehicles were undrivable and had to be towed away. Thankfully, nobody was injured, and the Honda driver admitted fault and apologized. Dave's insurance claim is still being processed, but sadly, his Volkswagen Passat was totaled. Dave told us his girls are big fans of both Wham Baam Dashcam and Wham Baam Dashcam. So shout out to Alice and Olivia. Raph was driving his Toyota Camry through New York City on a street with a speed limit of 25 miles per hour. He was proceeding through a green light, giving plenty of room for a double-parked vehicle and traffic in the left turn lane, when a car coming the other way swerved around traffic, slamming into Raph before he could react. His dashcam lost power when the impact occurred, so the video stops at this point. The vehicle that hit him was stolen, and it slammed into him at 55 miles per hour. Both vehicles were obliterated, and Raph was hospitalized with a broken femur. 8 hours later, he had surgery to insert a metal rod into his bone, held in place by 4 screws. Here's what Raf's car looked like before the accident. Now he has no car and hasn't been able to work for months. He's hired an attorney and they're currently trying to get access to footage from multiple NYPD cameras that captured the accident. We'll update you in a future episode if they're successful. Want to see how Matt's Toyota Corolla became one of 5 vehicles wrecked by a red light runner? Watch carefully because the action happens fast. Matt was crossing an intersection with a green light when a pickup driver ran his red light before getting T-boned by another pickup truck and by Matt's Corolla. The pickup then continued until it had collided with 2 more vehicles, making this a 5-vehicle collision. After Matt showed his footage to the police and they collected witness statements, they found the pickup driver responsible. The pickup driver was uninsured, so Matt had to make a claim with his own insurance provider. They totaled his Corolla after the repair estimate reached over $17,000 US. Instead, they cut him a check for just over $13,000. James, this submitter was headed home one snowy night. As he was transitioning from one highway to another, he noticed snowplows backing up traffic and figured he could squeeze by them. At the moment he was attempting to pass the snowplows, they moved to the right without signaling, surprising our submitter. When he swerved to avoid hitting the blade, the snow caused him to lose control. His Subaru Impreza slammed into the plow blade, ripping off the side view mirror, wrecking the driver's side door, and leaving yellow paint down the side of the car. Our submitter admits this accident was his own fault, and he knows he should have slowed down and merged behind the snowplows, so be gentle in the comments. He shared this clip hoping others will learn from his mistake. Fortunately, his no-fault insurance policy paid for his repairs anyway, which cost over $4,000 US. Watch what Matt witnessed happening right behind him while taking his daughter to the mall. The driver of a Toyota Avalon had cut from the passing lane to the exit lane to get around traffic. But when the SUV and the travel lane began a simultaneous merge, their evasive maneuver caused them to lose control. After striking the guardrail, the Avalon careened across the highway and into the Mazda SUV in the passing lane, smashing them both into the median barrier. The impact sent bicycles scattering across the highway as they fell from a rack attached to the Mazda. Thankfully, it doesn't look like any other drivers ran over the bikes. Matt stopped and provided a copy of his dashcam footage to law enforcement officers after they responded to investigate the cause of the collision. Marco didn't stand a chance against a Honda Pilot. When Marco proceeded legally through a yellow light, the driver of a Honda Pilot turned across his lane, failing to yield to oncoming traffic with the right-of-way. Marco told us the other driver claimed to have a green light, but the dashcam footage reveals that isn't possible. Either their turn arrow was still yellow, or it had turned red, just like the light facing Marco's direction. Regardless, it couldn't have been green while Marco's light was still yellow. He's now fighting to have his repair and medical bills paid for by the other driver's insurance provider. Eli was taking a friend to get his wisdom teeth removed when they watched a pickup slam into the fender of an oncoming SUV, sending it over an embankment and into an irrigation canal.
Oh my God.
The pickup spun around and stopped just short of hitting a power pole while the SUV plunged into the water. Eli helped the SUV driver climb out of one of the rear doors as the SUV sank into the water. In the meantime, his friend helped the occupants of the pickup, an adult and 2 children. First responders arrived quickly and provided aid to everyone involved in the collision. In spite of all that, Eli's friend was still able to get his wisdom teeth removed. Tux's grandparents were on their way to pick up a pizza when an oncoming pickup driver turned across their lane without realizing how fast the Kia Optima next to them was approaching the intersection. Evidently, the driver of the Kia didn't notice what was happening until just before the impact, as they didn't hit the brakes until the last moment. The collision sent the pickup spinning and put the car onto the sidewalk. Thankfully, Tux's grandparents were able to use the empty oncoming lanes to avoid the wreck. They continued while calling 911, then returned to the scene after picking up the pizza. They gave a statement to the police before going home, and Tux told us he immediately sent the cops a copy of this footage after they got home. He suspects both vehicles involved were totaled. Brian was driving through a construction zone on an interstate highway. As he entered an area with concrete barriers on both sides and nothing resembling a shoulder, traffic suddenly slowed way down. Brian slowed down safely, and so did the Kia driver behind him, but the driver of a Nissan SUV wasn't paying attention and slammed into the Kia, pushing it into Brian's Jeep as well. Brian had tried to make room in case something like this happened, but it wasn't enough to completely avoid the collision. Thankfully, he was able to avoid hitting the next car, and his steel bumper wasn't damaged. Thankfully, nobody was injured in the collision. Brian left after checking on the other drivers, but he has no idea how they went about cleaning up the accident, unless a tow truck drove backward down the highway to reach it. Darian is a rideshare driver who was transporting a passenger one morning at 4 a.m. when the driver of a Chevy Impala ran a stop sign at full speed in front of him, and he had no chance to stop before slamming into it. Darian slammed on the brakes and honked, but there was just no way he could avoid a collision. Bystanders called 911 while Darian checked on the occupants of the Impala. When police arrived, Darian showed officers his dashcam footage and they immediately found the Impala driver at fault. Thankfully, nobody was severely injured in the wreck. Sadly, both the Impala and Darian's Lexus RX were totaled by the collision. This submitter is a trucker who had a Civic driver wander a little too close to his big rig. Our submitter told us the young driver miscalculated his merge. With 16,000 pounds of cargo in his truck, it took him a long time to stop, even standing on the brakes. Thankfully, the other driver's only injury was a nosebleed. He admitted fault and they hugged it out, according to our submitter. Sadly, the Civic was totaled, but our submitter was able to get back to work. Tyler had parked his car outside his workplace and behind cars belonging to his coworkers. Suddenly, he heard a loud crunch. Without warning, a tree branch had snapped off and landed directly on the vehicles belonging to two of Tyler's coworkers before splintering. Both vehicles were totaled, but thankfully there were no injuries. By the way, when a car is considered totaled, that doesn't mean it's undrivable, unfixable, or worthless. It just means the insurance company would rather cut the owner a check than pay to fix the damage. Since the tree was on company property, Tyler's employer paid to replace both vehicles. JR was driving down an Oklahoma highway when the driver of a Kia Optima merged into the fender of his Rivian R1T, effectively pit maneuvering themselves off the front of his pickup truck. JR called 911 after the Optima ricocheted off the median barrier and spun across the entire highway. When a highway patrol officer arrived, he spoke with the Optima driver before getting JR's side of the story. After he showed the officer the footage from his Rivian's integrated dash cams, the officer escorted him across the highway so he could exchange information with the Optima driver. The Kia was undrivable and had to be towed away from the scene, while JR's pickup only sustained cosmetic damage and he was able to drive himself to a hospital to get checked out. Fixing his R1T will cost around $6,800 US. He wanted to shout out his sons AJ, Benny, and Reese, who watched the latest Wham Baam Dashcam episode with him every week. Don't forget to subscribe to Wham Baam Dashcam too. Ed was headed to work in Malaysia, going about 60 miles per hour to make it in time for a meeting. Without signaling, the driver of a Peugeot suddenly merged into Ed's lane in front of him. Ed had no time to slow down and slammed into the Peugeot, flipping it over. The police were notified, and Ed made a claim with the other driver's insurance. The other driver claimed he'd used his turn signal, but the dashcam video shows otherwise. Without the video evidence, the police told Ed he would have been held responsible for the accident. Fortunately, nobody was injured. Repairing Ed's car cost about $3,500 US. KN was driving his Nissan Leaf on his way to work one morning. As he approached a green light, he noticed another car not moving and assumed the driver wasn't paying attention. It turned out the other driver had stopped for another reason one KN couldn't see or hear until it was too late. A San Francisco police car T-boned Kayen's car and pushed it into a light pole, totaling both vehicles. Later investigation revealed the cop car hit the Leaf's driver's door at 32 miles per hour. The cop car spun around and struck the Nissan in the back as well, shoving it hard into the light pole. A witness later said the cop car had accelerated before the impact, and both vehicles' airbags deployed. The official police report stated that the officer driving had slowed down for the intersection, and since Kayen didn't have comprehensive insurance coverage, he got nothing in the way of compensation after being found at fault. Kayen's Nissan was completely destroyed, and he was briefly hospitalized before making a full recovery. Fortunately, he was able to replace his car with another of the same year. This emitter had just finished up a night shift and was heading home when a car ahead of him lost control. Our submitter told us the roads were wet after recent rainfall. He stopped to check on the driver of the car, which was actually one of his coworkers. Another coworker behind them also pulled over to help. The driver of the Camaro called 911 while our submitter waved at other drivers to slow down. A doctor also pulled over to render aid while they waited for paramedics. Incredibly, the driver of the wrecked car wasn't seriously injured. Watch what happened when a pickup rolled out in front of Ben's Mazda 3. First responders arrived at the scene, and the driver of the pickup truck was found responsible and given a citation. Ben told us the dashcam footage made the investigation trivial and everyone should get one. Sadly, Ben's Mazda 3 was totaled. He's just grateful everyone survived the collision, and he wanted to remind drivers to always look before entering the road. Juanito was driving in Chicago when the driver of a black GMC SUV pulled into his lane. He flashed his high beams at her, but she didn't budge, so he just went around her. Evidently, this outraged the GMC driver, who proceeded to follow Juanito, prompting him to turn onto a side street to avoid a confrontation. The GMC driver followed Juanito anyway by reversing and turning down the same street, then cut off and brake checked him. When he finally got around her before a traffic light, she drove up onto the sidewalk to get next to him. She proceeded to flip him off and yell at him, which he couldn't understand through his windows, while another young woman in the back seat waved a baseball bat at him. She then tossed a drink out of the window before driving off. Juanito ended up following her inadvertently since he was headed the same way, and she brake checked him one more time before he swerved around her and drove away. He drove to a nearby police station and waited a few minutes in the parking lot before heading home, just in case. Kalos was approaching a red light in his Toyota Corolla. When the light turned green, he began accelerating, but the driver of a Kia Telluride decided to make an unprotected left turn in front of him. Kalos couldn't avoid a collision even though he applied the brakes. The Kia driver then took off, leaving him confused. His Corolla, which was decorated for Halloween, was totaled, and he and his passenger were both injured. The Kia driver was later caught and arrested for DUI and hit and run. Kalos is still waiting to get a settlement for his totaled car. Hammy is a trucker who was on his way to his final stop in downtown Chicago after a week-long trip. As the traffic in the lane to his right began to slow down, the driver of a black Nissan Altima made a very expensive miscalculation. The Altima driver tried to cut in front of Hammy's truck, but they misjudged the gap and collided with the front corner, damaging his deer guard, bumper, and fog light. Meanwhile, the Altima lost control and collided with a Ford Fusion, which Hammy thinks will most likely result in those two vehicles being totaled. All involved drivers pulled over, and state police arrived less than a minute later. The cops had everyone continue to the next exit. Once there, the Altima driver immediately began blaming Hammy for the collision. In the chaos, he didn't know who was at fault, as the whole incident had happened so quickly. Thankfully, his dashcam footage allowed the police to conclude their investigation instantly. The Altima driver was proven responsible, and Hammy was cleared of any wrongdoing. Thankfully, nobody had been injured. Sadly, but perhaps not surprisingly, the Altima driver was uninsured. Fixing Hammy's truck will cost $5,000 US, which his employer is paying for. But if you thought that was the end of the story, you're wrong. 2 days later, the Altima driver called Hammy's boss and threatened her with a lawsuit. She laughed at him and wished him good luck before guaranteeing him he wouldn't make a penny off her. Hammy told us he's grateful for his dashcam, knowing his spotless driving record would have been done for if not for the footage proving his innocence. The stories of drivers caught in their lies are just starting, so buckle up. Just Dave was headed home from work when the driver of a pickup truck pulled across his lane, leaving him no opportunity to avoid a collision. Just Dave chose to steer toward the front of the pickup in an effort to avoid injuring the other driver. He turned out to be a 78-year-old man who hadn't looked left before pulling across the road. Just Dave's Hyundai Palisade summoned first responders. Thankfully, there were no serious injuries, but Just Dave's Hyundai was totaled by the collision. He told us he misses it dearly, but he's thankful everyone is okay. Just Dave said, "Tell your viewers to get a dash cam. I used 3 of them in my totaled vehicle, and they made the insurance process painless." He also told us he enjoys the fantastic narration and not having to pause the video to read text descriptions. Thanks, Just Dave. If you agree, we hope you'll subscribe. A pickup driver failed to secure his U-Haul trailer, and it came off the hitch while he was driving down the highway. Eventually, the safety chains failed and the trailer was sent rolling into the median barrier before flipping over. Thankfully, the trailer was completely empty. Angie was driving her BMW X1 on a highway in Canada when she approached a yield sign at an on-ramp. Another driver ignored the yield sign, cutting into traffic and forcing other drivers up ahead to slam on their brakes. Angie was following too closely and couldn't stop in time and rear-ended a Jeep. Luckily, the Audi driver behind her managed to stop a few inches short of her bumper. Angie filed an insurance claim and her BMW was deemed a total loss. Since the value of used cars has skyrocketed, she actually got back exactly what she paid for it over 20 months ago. The Jeep that she hit had a steel bumper that didn't even get scratched, so the driver didn't even bother to file an insurance claim. Nick was on his way to lunch when he noticed a Honda Civic approaching rapidly from behind. As it passed him on the left, a white car pulled onto the road from the right before cutting all the way into the far lane.
Woo, there it is.
The Civic driver's speeding and the other driver's illegal turn across lanes combined to create a collision that definitely could have been avoided. Both drivers pulled over, as did Nick, who checked on the driver of the white car. Thankfully, nobody was injured in the collision. Nick shared his dashcam footage with the responding deputy, but he told us he never found out who was determined to be responsible. Cast your vote in the comments below. Alex and his wife had just picked up their daughter from karate class and were on their way home when they found themselves in the middle of a huge storm with high winds and heavy rain. Alex told us he was going about 30 miles per hour due to the low visibility when he slammed on the brakes for debris in the road. He managed to slide to a stop before hitting a downed tree, but the driver behind him wasn't able to stop. Alex's Infiniti Q50 was launched over the downed tree when a Subaru slammed into it from behind. Firefighters, paramedics, and the State Highway Patrol all responded to the scene. Miraculously, there were no serious injuries, and Alex's daughter Sophia was completely unharmed. His insurance claim is still pending, but he said it seems pretty cut and dry as far as liability is concerned. He wanted to shout out his daughter for being a trooper and told us she insists on watching both Wham Baam Dashcam and Wham Baam Dashcam with him every week. Dan is a streetcar operator in the Czech Republic. He was making one last route to help out after a big accident, but he forgot to check the position of the track while entering an intersection. Luckily, nobody was hurt. Dan admits this accident was entirely his own fault and he was sure he'd get fired. Instead, he was allowed to keep his job as long as he paid for the damage. It cost him about $3,000 US. Fortunately, his insurance provider covered most of the repair costs. He wanted us to remind everyone that streetcars take a long time to stop. Even going only 30 miles per hour, it takes about 250 feet for a streetcar to come to a complete stop. This submitter was headed home from his girlfriend's house when the driver of a Jeep Liberty turned across his lane before slamming on the brakes. Even though our submitter slammed on the brakes and swerved, he wasn't able to avoid colliding with the Jeep at about 25 miles per hour. Amazingly, he wasn't injured at all. Police responded to the scene and cited the Jeep driver after 3 officers found them completely responsible. Our submitter is sad that his Mazda 3, which was 4 months from being paid off, will probably be totaled by insurance. He wanted to shout out his girlfriend, sister, aunt, and parents for helping him out after the collision. Cameron only had 12,000 miles on his 2022 Jeep Gladiator Rubicon EcoDiesel when a teenager driving a Honda failed to yield, turning in front of him and causing a brutal T-bone collision. Cameron said he'd only had the pickup for 6 months when this happened. The insurance claim is still being processed, but he fully expects them to pay off the truck and cover his medical bills based on this footage. Cameron described his Jeep Gladiator as his dream car and told us, "Rip to a real one. We feel you, bro. We're just glad you're okay." Nick was driving about 30 miles per hour in a 40 mile per hour zone and catching up to another vehicle going about 20 miles per hour. Since the lane lines indicated passing was allowed, Nick decided to pass the vehicle. Just as he made his move, the driver of the pickup truck put on their turn signal and immediately began turning left. Nick stood on the brake pedal, but the pickup driver had practically stopped to make their turn and there was no way he could avoid hitting them. Luckily, nobody was injured. At first, the other driver's insurance provider found Nick to be 100% at fault. But their version of events kept changing, and each time, their account was disproved by the dashcam footage. At one point, they said Nick had attempted passing over double yellow lines. After this was refuted, they said their customer had used their turn signal early, but that's not true either. Both Nick and his own insurance provider are still fighting over who's at fault. What do you think? Let us know in the comments. Our first submission is a perfect example of why you should never race on public roads. Not only could it cost you, but even completely innocent drivers might get caught up in the chaos. Our submitter was driving with his younger sister in the front seat. He told us she's afraid to sit in the front after watching lots of Wham Baam Dashcam videos, but he assured her that nothing bad would happen. It looks like he spoke too soon. 2 racing drivers sped by on either side before one lost control and hit the other. The 2 out-of-control vehicles proceeded to collide with 3 more, making this a 5-vehicle collision. Incredibly, our submitter's Toyota RAV4 was completely untouched, partly due to the fact that he stood on the brake pedal once the carnage began to unfold in front of him. He pulled over and checked on the occupants of the involved vehicles. Incredibly, nobody was seriously injured. He provided his dashcam footage to the victims and the responding police officers before continuing on his way. Our submitter told us this incident inspired him to upgrade to a dashcam with both front and rear camera angles. He also wanted to shout out his younger sisters, Tuntun and Princess. Watch what Tony witnessed while taking his family to his parents' house. A flatbed hauling a boat took a corner too fast, swinging the boat into a vehicle and onto the pavement. Tony pulled over to block traffic and check on the victim. She was fine, but the driver of a second flatbed that had been following the first kept yelling at Tony to go away, even though he was staying well clear of the accident. The woman was fine, but the same can't be said for the boat. The flatbed driver dragged it half a block and into a parking lot before getting it back on the truck. Michaela was driving her Volkswagen Golf down a highway in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Watch what happened when a pickup driver swerved without checking his blind spot to avoid a car that had stopped. The pickup cut off a minivan, and the driver had no chance to stop before hitting the back of the pickup. While the minivan rolled over, the pickup spun into Michaela's lane and she hit it head-on. Incredibly, there were no serious injuries. Unfortunately, all 3 vehicles involved were totaled. Hunter was headed to work one morning while it was both raining and snowing. He admits he should have been driving below the speed limit of 55 miles per hour given the conditions, but he was late on his way to work. As he crested a hill, he saw what looked like headlights in the distance. Only too late did he realize they were actually reverse lights in his lane. And when he swerved to miss the pickup truck, he ran right into its plow. Hunter's Chevy Cruze slid into the snowplow even though he was standing on the brake pedal. The impact totaled his Cruze and destroyed the plow attachment. Hunter called 911 and the road conditions delayed first responders for 15 minutes. Neither of them requested medical attention, but that ended up being a mistake as Hunter had bruised ribs and tinnitus from the collision. Insurance investigators found the pickup driver at fault, and his insurance provider gave Hunter enough money to replace his Chevy Cruze with a used 2021 Nissan Altima a week later. I think we can learn 2 lessons from this story. Slow down when the road is slick, and get checked out by paramedics even if you feel fine in the moment. Tanim was headed to work when he approached a Tahoe hogging the passing lane. Tanim used the travel lane to get around him, which is legal in the United States, but then traffic ahead of him suddenly slowed down. The Tahoe slammed into Tanim's BMW X5, pushing it into the pickup truck in front of him. All his airbags deployed, and BMW Assist automatically summoned first responders. When state troopers arrived, they watched his dashcam footage and found the Tahoe driver responsible for the collision. Thankfully, nobody was injured. Tanim told us he had no pain or soreness at all. Unfortunately, his X5 was totaled, but he just ordered a new M3 competition. He told us his was the first X5 of this body style to be involved in a collision at this speed, and he spent several months talking to BMW engineers about it. Tanim told us that thanks to this event, he'll always have a BMW SUV in the stable. Simon was headed home from work when a Porsche came flying up behind his Audi Q3. The Porsche driver tried to blame the sun for blinding her, but that doesn't explain why she was driving so fast. Simon has moderate whiplash and both vehicles were totaled. A few minutes after the crash, her mother and friends showed up with a tow truck and tried to quickly get Simon's info so they could leave. Simon knew something wasn't right, so he made them wait for the police, and they were not happy. When the cops arrived, they gave the driver of the Porsche a breathalyzer test. We don't know what the results were, but we do know that she was immediately arrested. Simon wanted to shout out everyone who stopped to help, especially an off-duty cop who kept him from having a panic attack. He also said he's thinking about replacing his Audi with a Tesla. Keegan's father was headed home from the gym in his Kia Optima during a heavy rainstorm when the driver of an SUV in the passing lane tapped the brakes before losing control. As the SUV hydroplaned across the highway, Keegan's father was unable to avoid colliding with it. The impact sent his Kia across the shoulder and into the ditch. While the SUV did the same, Keegan's father called 911 before checking on the other driver. Incredibly, nobody was seriously hurt in this incident. He's now waiting to hear back from his insurance provider. Keegan told us he and his dad watch our videos together, and our channel inspired them both to install dash cams. If you need one for your ride, you'll find our recommended models in the video description. Want to know how this happened? Buckle up, we're about to find out. Mario was on his way to pick up his daughter from kindergarten. A young woman driving a Lexus T-boned Mario's Kia Rio at 60 miles per hour, sending it rolling 60 feet before landing on top of a parked Toyota Corolla. Along the way, it hit a traffic signal as well. All 3 vehicles were totaled. The other driver said she'd been looking at a map on her phone and hadn't seen Mario. He sustained neck and back injuries, but he said he's lucky to be alive and he's glad this happened before picking up his daughter. Craig was passing a trailer full of portable toilets when he was suddenly struck by a crappy situation. The wind pushed one of the porta potties off the trailer and it rocketed into the front of Craig's car. Thankfully, the driver took responsibility for the incident and the company paid to repair Craig's car. They also paid for his rental car while he waited 9 weeks for parts. All told, it cost them $17,000 after a failed strap made them lose their crap. This submitter was driving his Volvo XC70 early one morning to work when he fell asleep behind the wheel. The airbags deployed when the car came crashing down, and the driver immediately felt pain in his back. He woke up when the car veered off the road. He tried to steer back out of the ditch, but he wasn't able to. He missed 3 trees before the car got some air. He managed to get out of the car and call emergency services, and first responders quickly arrived at the scene. A tow truck with a crane had to be called and was able to lift his car out of the field the Volvo had landed in. The submitter ended up having a broken vertebra in his spine. Since then, he's had 3 surgeries. After several months, he's finally made a full recovery. His car also made a full recovery after he paid a $2,800 repair bill. Ryan was heading to visit his parents after work one day when the driver of the white Subaru in front of him didn't realize a driver ahead was stopping to wait for oncoming traffic before making a left turn. Without enough time to slow down and stop, the Subaru driver veered into the oncoming lane before colliding with the Ford Escape the other driver had been waiting for in the first place. Ryan called 911 and first responders arrived 3 minutes later. The couple in the Ford Escape were actually his parents' neighbors, and Ryan provided them with a copy of his dashcam footage. He caught up with them a week later, and they told Ryan the footage had been very useful for their insurance claim. Cameron was headed home in his Honda Civic when the vehicle in front of him kicked up a chunk of concrete. The concrete was debris left over from construction and weighed 5 pounds. When it hit Cameron's windshield, it punched a hole through the glass and sprayed shards all over the cabin. Cameron was hospitalized and needed surgery to remove glass from his face. He sent us some gnarly photos which YouTube won't let us show you. $26,000 later, both he and his car are okay. Caleb was on his way to work during a blizzard, and he told us his commute is only about 5 minutes long. He assumed he'd have no trouble getting to work safely in his Nissan Pathfinder, but he was wrong. As I love to say, it's not the weather I'm worried about, it's the other drivers. A Nissan Armada driver took a corner too fast, and neither he nor Caleb were able to avoid a direct collision between their vehicles. Police were called, but the operator told Caleb it was too dangerous for officers to respond. Both vehicles had to be towed away. The fate of the Armada is unknown, but Caleb told us his Pathfinder was totaled. Thankfully, there were no severe injuries. Caleb told us he loves Wham Bam, and his dream is to own a Tesla Model S Plaid someday. Speaking of Tesla, our main channel Wham Bam Tesla Cam just hit 1 million subscribers. This channel isn't even at 500,000 yet, so we've got a ways to go if we want to catch up. If you love Wham Bam as much as Caleb does, hit that subscribe button and let's keep rolling. Aaron was driving his Jeep Wrangler down a Texas highway when he noticed something coming off a trailer he was passing. Little did he know, it was actually the lug nuts coming loose and flying at his car, and it was about to get a whole lot worse. With nothing holding it on, a tire flew off the trailer and straight toward Aaron's Jeep. He managed to avoid a head-on hit, but the tire still smashed into his door, and his evasive maneuver put him in the grass. The other driver didn't want his insurance premiums to go up, so he paid Aaron out of his own pocket to repair both passenger side doors and replace a custom wrap. The total cost of repairs was just shy of $4,000. Justin was headed straight through a green light when an oncoming driver made an unprotected left turn across Justin's lane.
A crash has been
Justin couldn't avoid T-boning the turning Hyundai. Incredibly, nobody was seriously injured in the collision. When he called roadside assistance to have his car towed, they sent a contracted tow truck operator. The towing company then held onto his Honda Civic until the other driver's insurance provider paid them for the tow, which meant he didn't get paid for his totaled car until 3 months later. Nathan was driving along when he encountered a man getting into a fight with a bus and evidently losing. The man hurled insults at the driver, who kept the bus doors closed while the man failed to damage the bus at all. Nathan continued on while the man walked away. Maybe next time he should pick on someone his own size. The driver of a Dodge minivan caused a 5-vehicle collision when they ran a red light and got hit by a Toyota SUV. That impact sent the minivan head-on into a Mini Cooper, which was then shoved backward into Angel's Honda Accord. The 5th vehicle involved was a Chevy pickup that was barely damaged when the Mini Cooper hit it while spinning. The other 4 vehicles were all totaled, and Angel got a check for $24,000 to replace his Accord. The minivan driver was found responsible for all damages. Thankfully, nobody was seriously injured. Angel told us he's thankful we are all alive and kicking. He also asked us to please encourage everyone to get a dash cam. Joseph had taken his manual transmission Chevy Cobalt in for an oil change. After an employee moved his car into the shop, they left the car in gear and didn't set the brake. When another employee had finished filling the oil, they reached in the open window of the car and turned the ignition, sending the car lurching forward and smashing into a toolbox before the engine stalled. The manager told Joseph that there had been a minor bump, but Joseph was shocked when he watched his dashcam footage and learned what had really happened. After he showed the shop owner the footage, they did the right thing and agreed to pay for the $670 in damage. He also let us know that the shop owner has been really helpful with the whole situation. This submitter watched an SUV driver lose control and wreck after a black car nearly sideswiped him. Thankfully, our submitter was able to avoid colliding with the Pontiac Aztek before pulling over and calling 911. Other drivers also stopped to help, and our submitter found out the SUV had been occupied by a couple and their baby. Incredibly, nobody was seriously injured. Our submitter provided the father with a copy of his dashcam footage, then gave a statement to the responding police. He was also able to provide the license plate number of the black car. The mother and baby took a ride to the hospital to get checked out, and the father later called our submitter and confirmed that neither had been seriously hurt. Chris was on his way home from a job interview when his Kia Rio was suddenly rear-ended by a pickup truck. It doesn't look like the pickup driver even tried to slow down until the last second. Chris managed to keep his car in his own lane, but the pickup veered off into a ditch. Both vehicles were totaled. The pickup driver's insurance provider only paid for a rental car for Chris for a week, and his attorneys are now negotiating with them for a larger settlement. Unfortunately, this caused him to lose his pizza delivery job because he didn't have a car, and the restaurant's new management accused him of failing to communicate even though he told them about what had happened. Remember when I mentioned Chris had been heading home from a job interview? At his new job, he deals with no food, no customers, and he gets his own company vehicle. He sent along a shout out for his old manager Bean, who did a great job running the pizza restaurant until the new management came along and fudged it all up. This submitter was on his way to work one morning when a random man came stumbling out of the woods before throwing himself in front of and then onto his Subaru Forester. After throwing himself on the front of our submitter's vehicle, he sped off before the guy was able to hit it with his stick. When he posted this video to a local group on social media, he got a surprising comment in response. Someone else told him they'd witnessed the incident from a vehicle following behind him, and the crazed man ran back into the woods after our submitter drove away. He said he's now nervous anytime he drives on that ramp. He also said, to anyone and everyone without a dash cam, get one. Get the best you can afford with front and rear cameras if possible. This submitter was driving down a Florida highway with a speed limit of 65 miles per hour. When traffic slowed down to about 55, the driver of the pickup ahead of him didn't notice until it was too late. Even though the pickup driver tried to swerve around the red Nissan, it rear-ended the corner before continuing down the road. Out of the view of our submitter's dashcam, the red car then sideswiped a black SUV. All 3 drivers involved pulled over to exchange information. Our submitter called 911 before quickly uploading his dashcam footage so he could provide the link to the police and the involved drivers. And to us, of course. This submitter was headed home after filling up his tank. As he pulled out onto the road, the passenger of a pickup truck turning the other way flipped him off for no reason. So he returned the favor, admittedly not the best move. A while later, he noticed the same pickup racing up behind him. The driver overtook him before slamming on the brakes, bringing them both to a standstill. Then, the driver got out and started inviting our submitter to fight him. Instead of accepting this invitation, he drove around the deranged man to get away. When he did, the pickup driver slapped his side mirror, shattering the glass, cracking the cover, and chipping the passenger window. Our submitter pulled in front of him and took a quick video of his license plate with his phone. The pickup driver must have realized that he'd committed a crime because he reversed away as our submitter filmed him. Thanks to the dashcam footage, it didn't take long for our submitter to find the guy and take him to court. He never once showed remorse, repeating that this all could have been avoided if only our submitter hadn't flipped him off. As if he then had no choice but to react with violence. Needless to say, this excuse didn't work with the judge. The attacker has to pay our submitter almost $600 to fix his mirror, which is actually less than the total repair bill. I guess our submitter felt generous, even though the other guy doesn't feel bad at all. Tiago was driving in California and was proceeding through an intersection on a green light when another driver ran the light in front of him and he couldn't avoid T-boning them. Tiago told us he was on his way back from a mechanic after getting new tires and brake pads when this happened. When police responded, the other driver told them he'd been turning right, so they didn't give him a citation. Tiago's dashcam footage clearly shows that the other driver had been running a red light to make a left turn. By the way, you may recognize Tiago's name. He sent in the lead video we used in episode 134 too. In that footage, he recorded a pickup running a red light before T-boning a Mercedes making a left turn. This time, he T-boned a Mercedes, but the Mercedes driver was the one running a red light. We'll put a link to that episode at the end of this one, just in case you haven't seen it. Tiago told us his son Arthur, a big fan of our channels, made sure his dad sent us the dashcam footage from this incident. Thanks, Arthur. K0D was headed to a store to buy school supplies when a lady driving a Toyota Corolla failed to yield to traffic and pulled in front of him. He locked up his brakes and honked, but he couldn't stop fast enough to avoid a collision. The Toyota driver then smashed the gas, hopped a curb, and hit a parked Lexus before finally stopping. The lady in her 40s accused K0D of merging into her, and she even summoned family and friends to the scene to lie and say they'd seen the accident and that K0D was at fault. When the police arrived, they declared the Toyota driver at fault as soon as they saw the dashcam footage. They cited her for 3 separate infractions. Her insurance provider, Progressive, which happens to be the insurance provider for the Toyota and the Lexus owners as well, refused to provide him with a rental car, and they only offered him 1/3 of what the car was worth. They also won't replace the laptop he'd borrowed from his university that was damaged in the accident, and the university is now threatening to withhold his registration. Fortunately, K0D has hired an attorney, and they're currently fighting the insurance company for better compensation. Our first submitter was approaching an intersection he called notorious for collisions when an oncoming driver ran their red light before T-boning another SUV, sending it rolling through the air. After the impact, the Jeep rolled onto its side, and we can actually see the airbags on the passenger side inflating moments before the Jeep lands. Our submitter rendered aid while his wife called 911. With the help of bystanders, he helped the Jeep driver out and made sure nobody was injured. First responders arrived 5 or 6 minutes later, but our submitter told us the driver of the red SUV admitted to exceeding the 35-mile-per-hour speed limit by 10 to 15 miles per hour before the police arrived. He later sent a copy of this footage, which clearly shows the red SUV running the red light, to the Colorado Springs Police Department after they requested it. Sean was driving his Dodge Ram 2500 on his way to pick up his girlfriend from work when a turning box truck blocked his view of a GMC pickup turning into the road ahead of him. Thankfully, Sean was able to slam on the brakes, preventing the collision from being any worse. The other driver took full responsibility and apologized, and our insurance provider paid for the repairs to Sean's pickup. Thankfully, nobody was injured, including Sean's dog, who had been riding in the back seat. Fixing Sean's 2003 Dodge Ram 2500 cost $1,700 US. Michael had just gotten coffee from a local convenience store. When he left the parking lot, he ended up behind a Buick Century. While Michael was looking to the left to check for traffic, the Buick driver stopped at a yield sign for no reason. He hit the Buick at about 20 miles per hour, denting the rear bumper cover and taking out his own front bumper cover and headlight. The Buick driver told him at the time that he wasn't injured. Later, the Buick driver claimed he was injured and tried suing Michael for $500,000 in damages. His insurance provider eventually settled with him for $15,000 US to avoid further litigation. Anthony was driving down a Connecticut highway when he watched a mobile crane collide with an overpass right in front of him. The partially extended crane arm smashed into the overpass, knocking a sign down to the highway below. The driver of a sedan barely escaped without damage, while Anthony ran over part of the sign before colliding with a barrier. He told us hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage was done to both the crane and the overpass. Incredibly, nobody was seriously injured in the incident. Anthony's insurance claim is still being processed. I was driving my Hyundai XG350 along one day with my wife Melissa in the passenger seat when I slowed to a stop to make a left turn across traffic to get to my house just 2 blocks away. The driver of a pickup truck behind me wasn't paying attention and rear-ended my car at about 35 miles per hour. Luckily, my foot was already on the brake, so I didn't get pushed into any oncoming cars. I pulled off the road and helped the pickup driver get out of the road so we could exchange contact information. Melissa called 911 and the fire department came and checked everyone out.
Okay? Really bad whiplash.
She'd hurt her neck and I'd hit the bill of my hat on the steering wheel, which left a small cut on my forehead. I'd also hurt my neck and back, but fortunately nobody needed to go to the hospital. I was able to drive my car the remaining 2 blocks home, but it was totaled. The pickup driver's insurance provider paid for the car and for our medical treatment. After the accident, the pickup driver tried telling his insurance provider that the accident had been my fault because he hadn't seen me, as if that was somehow my fault. After I sent my dashcam videos to both insurance companies, they ruled 100% in my favor and found the pickup driver to be fully at fault. I know my car looks weird, so let me offer a little explanation. I used to produce an audio podcast called Foamcast Radio all about the Nerf Blaster hobby, and I decorated my car to promote it. You can still go listen to the podcast, by the way. Someday I might even make some new episodes. Randy and his wife had just left an ice cream shop when the driver of an Audi sped past them, and Randy could already tell something terrible was about to happen. Even though Randy's BMW X5 was going over 40 miles per hour, the Audi flew by them before slamming into an SUV that had entered the road. Doubtless the crossing driver believed it was safe to cross, but evidently she didn't see the Audi. Randy and his wife stopped to check on everyone involved, and he told us there were 5 occupants in the Audi, including 2 teenagers and 2 young children. Some of them hadn't even been wearing seatbelts. He also told us that the police gave the Audi driver a field sobriety test while the driver of the red SUV was taken to the hospital. Randy gave the responding state trooper a copy of his dashcam video. Junior was headed home from a friend's house when the driver of a Ford Edge lost control before ricocheting off a guardrail. Before Junior had a chance to react, the SUV had ended up in front of his Honda Odyssey. Junior told us the SUV was behind his A-pillar, and he only remembers the airbag suddenly activating as he T-boned it. 5 occupants, including a child, jumped out of the SUV and ran away before Junior was able to reach them. By the time police arrived a few minutes later, they had all disappeared into the night. The SUV was a rental, and the police are still searching for the people who'd been in it. Junior is now waiting to hear back from the police. Ryan was driving his Nissan Leaf when a young driver ran a red light that had been red for 20 seconds, T-boning Ryan at around 50 miles per hour. The car's safety systems activated, cutting off power from the traction battery. Ryan's wife was knocked unconscious, and a Good Samaritan helped them both out of the car. They live only a few blocks from where this happened, so one of the responding police officers gave them a ride home. Ryan then started the insurance process, which went smoothly. In fact, they got such a good deal on the settlement that Ryan actually made a nice profit off his car. He used the money to replace it with his dream car, a Tesla Model S P85D. Now that's an upgrade. By the way, see this liquid on the windshield? Ryan's wife had been trying Vietnamese milk tea for the first time that day, and she really liked the few sips she had, but she hasn't been able to stomach it since. Slowski was about to leave after picking up some food and was waiting at a red light when some guy he'd never seen before approached his car before slapping his headlight. Slowski told us his window was down, and after smacking his headlight, the guy tried to reach into his Honda Civic and grab him. Slowski pulled into the other lane and turned to get away from the guy, then headed into a parking lot. The original audio included copyrighted music, so we had to mute it, but it sounded to us like the guy said, "I want my money," before smacking Slowski's headlight. Thankfully, his meat flipper didn't cause any damage. David was driving along when a Mercedes-Benz cut across traffic. David tried to slam on his brakes at the last minute, but so did the driver of the Mercedes, and he hit its right rear wheel. David said the Mercedes wasn't going to be a problem until it started stopping in his lane. Until then, he thought the driver was making a left turn into the lane next to him. The passenger in the Benz was shaken up, but she didn't require transportation to the hospital, even though she did file an insurance claim for a neck injury. David was alone in his truck, but he had his dash cam as a witness to the accident. The police gave the other driver a ticket at the scene, but David was later called into court because she decided to fight her ticket. She produced David's dash cam video as evidence that she did stop at the stop sign. The judge agreed that she'd stopped, but added, "You then pulled directly into traffic." Her ticket was not dismissed. David's insurance provider wanted to total his truck, so he decided not to proceed with the claim and fix the truck himself. Jonathan's mother and daughter were driving down a Texas highway in her Lincoln Navigator when traffic suddenly slowed way down, and the driver of a pickup hauling a Lexus SUV on a trailer had nowhere to go. To avoid rear-ending a car in the passing lane, the pickup driver plowed into the back of a semi-truck, obliterating the passenger side of the pickup and breaking the straps that were holding the SUV to the trailer. Jonathan's mother immediately called 911 to report the collision, then provided her contact info to the involved drivers so they could contact her for her dashcam footage. Incredibly, there were no serious injuries. Who do you think is at fault in this scenario? Should the pickup driver have left himself more follow distance? Should the car driver have given themselves less? Did the pickup driver do the right thing by rear-ending the semi? Give us your expert opinion in the comments below. Ruben watched the driver of a Honda race a yellow light and get awarded the T-Bone Trophy.
Honda bumped! Honda bumped!
A turning Toyota got Honda bumped by the speeding Civic and got a furrowed fender and a dented door. Ruben stopped and offered his dashcam footage to both drivers and the police, but they all turned him down. Tony was waiting in a left turn lane for his light to turn green so he could make a U-turn. When it did, a pickup driver in the oncoming turn lane ran his red light to go straight. Tony had been watching for anyone who might make a right on red and cut him off, and he hadn't been expecting the pickup truck to go straight from a turn lane, let alone run a red light. The security guard driving the company pickup claimed Tony had been at fault and that he'd had a green light. Even when Tony told him he had a dash cam, he refused to admit to any wrongdoing.
Ran a red light and I have it on video.
When the police arrived, they were all ready to cite Tony for making an improper U-turn, until his wife arrived with a laptop so he could show them his dashcam footage. They then immediately cleared him of any fault and commended him for having a dashcam. His insurance claim is now pending, and he's waiting to see if his Hyundai Santa Fe will be repaired or if it's totaled. Aaron was on his way back to work after lunch when he spotted the driver of a Kia Seltos slowing down for a green light. Watch what happened when they suddenly turned left across 3 lanes. The Kia driver turned into the path of a police SUV, sideswiping it as it was passing at approximately 60 miles per hour. Aaron stopped and checked on the police officer, and thankfully both he and the Kia driver were unhurt. After Aaron provided a witness statement to another police officer, he found out the cop who'd been hit had just finished his training period, and this was his first day on patrol by himself. What a way to kick things off. Want to see what happens when you start drinking at 6 in the morning? Keep watching. Matt was towing a trailer full of wooden fence posts when a Ford Explorer hopped a curb in reverse before plowing into his 2017 Jeep Wrangler. The Explorer driver claims he got his foot stuck under the brake pedal, evidently with his other foot smashing the accelerator. While in reverse, the Explorer bounced off a Cadillac before jumping the curb, destroying a section of wooden fence, and finally slamming into Matt's Jeep. He continued flooring the gas for 30 seconds before finally turning off the car. For his part, Matt had seen the out-of-control SUV and had stopped, but he had no time to back up, especially considering that he was pulling a trailer at the time. Matt says the guy was very apologetic and couldn't figure out how his foot had gotten stuck like that, but Matt has a theory about that. After the police arrived, the Explorer driver was arrested for driving under the influence. Matt sent his dashcam footage to the other driver's insurance provider, and they paid to have the Jeep repaired after accepting responsibility. Matt says the guy's wife was way more upset with him than he was. "We're all just glad the Explorer's steering wheel was turned to the left and not to the right. There was a kid's birthday party happening in the park on the other side of the parking lot when this all went down." This submitter's mother was taking her 4-month-old boxer puppy to get a bath from a dog groomer when she noticed that the pickup truck ahead of her was hauling a mattress and box spring that weren't very well secured. Before she had an opportunity to pass the pickup, the bed went flying out of the bed and she wasn't able to avoid running into the box spring. The pickup driver was very apologetic and accepted full responsibility. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, and so far, the pickup driver's insurance is handling everything. Our submitter asked us to shout out his mother for staying calm and his son Rowan, who enjoys all the Wham Bam channels. David was following behind his son while he was moving for college. Watch what happened when his son pulled out in front of another SUV driver who had the right-of-way. The other driver wasn't able to stop before T-boning David's son's Chevy Traverse. The white SUV was occupied by a mother and her daughter, and David's son also had his dog on board. Amazingly, there were no serious injuries. That crash looks brutal, and we're guessing both vehicles were totaled by the impact. We're glad that everybody was okay, including David's dog, and we hope this incident didn't affect David's college plans. This submitter was headed to his brother's house. Another driver turned across 4 lanes of traffic and into the path of our submitter's Jeep, causing $22,000 in damage. The Jeep had to be towed away, but the other vehicle was still drivable. Amazingly, the other driver blamed our submitter for the fact that she'd pulled in front of him while he was moving at 55 miles per hour. Unsurprisingly, the police found her at fault, and her insurance provider paid for repairs and a rental. Mike was waiting at a traffic light when he spotted a driver coming from the left at high speed, and before he knew it, the car had wrecked into a light pole directly in front of him. The impact caused the car to roll over while the light pole came crashing down in the street. Mike called 911 before checking on the driver of the car, then waited for first responders to arrive. When police arrived, Mike shared his dashcam footage with them. An officer estimated the other driver's speed at 45 miles per hour at the time of the collision, a touch over the 30 mile per hour speed limit. Mike said the driver claimed his accelerator pedal had gotten stuck, causing the collision. Mike also thanked us for our videos and told us our channel is the reason he got a dashcam. We've got 19 more dashcam videos coming up, so hit that subscribe button and let's keep rolling. Morgan had just finished making fun of what he calls a goofy paint job on the Nissan in front of him at a traffic light. As the Nissan driver accelerated away, racing another driver next to him, he lost control and left the road.
Oh my! We need to stop. We need to stop. call 911.
Morgan immediately pulled over, calling 911 while his wife ran to render aid. The driver who'd been racing the Nissan then accidentally put his car in reverse before getting out and had to climb through his window to get to the brake. Morgan told us the Nissan driver wasn't seriously injured and was treated by paramedics for a tiny scratch on his head. Police wrote him a citation after he admitted to driving recklessly. The other racing driver noped out once it was clear the Nissan driver was okay. Morgan gave the police a copy of his dashcam footage, but he never heard anything back from them. He told us that after this incident, they've upgraded their dashcam to 4K, a decision we definitely support. If you need a high-quality dashcam for your car, links to our recommendations are in the video description. Eli was killing time reading in his Kia EV6, which was parked on the side of a road in San Diego. Suddenly, the driver of a Hyundai Santa Fe slammed into the back of his Kia at full speed. In case it isn't clear, the other driver crossed a striped safety margin and a bike lane before rear-ending Eli's EV6. The impact shoved it into a Toyota 4Runner and set off the Hyundai driver's airbags. Eli didn't manage to get the other driver's insurance info before paramedics rushed him away, but it turned out he had custom amateur radio operator license plates. Eli was able to Google them and get the guy's info in seconds. Rico was on his way home after picking up his son from school. As he made a protected left turn through an intersection, his Ford F-150 was suddenly T-boned by a red light runner from the left. The driver of a Ford Mustang had mistaken Rico's truck for a crowd of bystanders and slammed into the side of it. After Rico's insurance provider was quoted $45,000 to fix the damage, they chose to total rather than fix it. The 2022 F-150 Lariat was Rico's first new vehicle, and he only got to drive it for 9 months. He wanted to shout out his son Jericho, and he told us they're both huge Wham Bam fans. Nelson was driving down a California highway when he encountered a CHP traffic brake, which is when a patrol vehicle drives back and forth slowly across all lanes of a highway to slow down traffic for an incident up ahead. Nelson and most other drivers noticed the sea of red brake lights ahead and came to a stop, but one driver behind Nelson wasn't paying attention and rear-ended another vehicle at highway speed. The vehicle that was initially hit was pushed past Nelson and into several other vehicles. Thankfully, Nelson wasn't involved in the collision. He was late for work, so didn't stay, but he hopes everyone else was okay. Natalie was headed to work on a sunny California morning when she witnessed a brutal 4-vehicle collision as she made her way toward downtown San Diego. When traffic in the passing lane came to a stop, the driver of a Ram pickup didn't react quickly enough before plowing into a car. The car was pushed into the back of an SUV, which lifted off the ground as it spun. The SUV then collided with a Tesla Model 3. Natalie pulled over to assist the victims, and she told us she had to pry the white car's door open so the driver could exit. Thankfully, nobody was seriously injured. Natalie gave her contact info to the responding police and provided copies of her dashcam footage to the involved drivers. She thinks the car and the SUV were probably totaled by the collision. Allie was on her way home from a job interview when a pickup truck ahead of her suddenly lost control and went tumbling down the highway before coming to rest upside down. It's impossible to tell from the footage what caused the sudden loss of control, but the pickup scattered debris all over the interstate before stopping. Allie made sure the occupants were okay before calling 911. She stayed and gave a statement to the first responders. Thankfully, nobody was seriously injured in the wreck. What the heck is happening here? Let's go back to the beginning and find out. Ricardo was asleep at 2 a.m. and his neighbor came and woke him up after this happened. The drunk driver of a red Jeep smashed into Ricardo's Volkswagen after hitting another car parked behind him. This obliterated a front wheel, but that wasn't enough to stop the Jeep driver. After backing up, the drunk driver hit Ricardo's car a couple more times before smashing into a white Mazda parked ahead of him on the street. Bystanders put themselves in harm's way trying to stop the drunk driver, but he took off again, smashing into no fewer than 3 more cars before finally stopping. Eventually, the Jeep became immobilized. Police arrived and the driver was taken to a hospital for minor injuries. His insurance policy couldn't cover the over $35,000 in damage done, with $9,500 of that being done to Ricardo's Jetta. Ricardo had to use his own insurance policy to cover the damage to his car, and the drunk driver's insurance policy only paid for his deductible. Robert was on his way to work in his Ford F-250 when he slowed down from 70 miles per hour to around 20 for traffic that was building up ahead of him. Sadly, the driver of the Hyundai behind him didn't notice until it was too late. The Hyundai driver had tried to swerve into the breakdown lane before rear-ending Robert's truck, sending the car tumbling before it came to rest upside down. Robert immediately called 911 before assisting the occupants. Multiple other drivers stopped to help. Thankfully, nobody was seriously injured in the brutal collision. Matthias was driving his Honda Accord in Royal Oak, Michigan. There was heavy snow, and traffic was starting to pile up on the highway. A Chrysler was going way too fast, and in an attempt to avoid hitting a Cadillac Escalade, the driver overreacted and hit the truck in front of Matthias instead. Matthias never hit the brakes since he knew it wouldn't help, and instead decided to slowly steer in an evasive maneuver. Once he'd cleared the Chrysler, he hit the gas and steered to the right to gain traction and was able to dodge the Ford Focus.
Alright.
We agree with your passengers, Matthias. Nice driving.
You guys okay?
Yes!
Mounish was taking his wife to the airport with his brother along for the ride when his Dodge Durango was T-boned by a school bus as it ran a red light. The impact of the school bus, which contained nobody except the driver by the way, was hard enough to spin Mounish's Durango completely around. Sadly, the collision totaled the SUV and Mounish's wife didn't make her flight. His dashcam footage clearly shows the bus didn't get a green light until after the collision. But police told Mounish they would have assigned Mounish the blame for the collision if not for his dashcam video. Mounish told us that after watching our videos, he installed his dashcam only 2 weeks before this happened. Thanks to the video proof that Mounish was in the right, the bus driver was found responsible for the collision. Today's first video comes to us from Paul in California, and while it may seem unremarkable at first, keep watching because this highway collision was captured from multiple angles and you'll only see them here. Paul was headed south on I-5 when he watched an SUV driver pit maneuver themselves off the front of a semi-truck before spinning off the highway. Paul called 911 and reported the collision, then contacted the trucking company to provide them with his dashcam footage. The company then gave him a copy of their own footage, along with permission to share it with us. The trucker's perspective reveals that the Buick SUV actually slammed head-on into a culvert ditch after leaving the interstate. Ouch! Paul didn't tell us if anyone was injured in this collision, but based on the footage, we're guessing that Buick is down for the count. We absolutely love being able to watch things captured from multiple viewpoints. If you do too, hit that subscribe button, and let's see if we can reach 500,000 subscribers by Christmas. This submitter was driving in India with his mother and traffic was at a standstill. Suddenly, the trunk of the car in front of them popped open. The submitter honked in an attempt to get the other driver's attention, but this didn't work. Just as his mother was about to step out of the car and close it for them, the driver of the other car jumped out. He went to the back of the car and opened the trunk where a man was sleeping. They had a quick chat, and apparently the guy asked what all the commotion was about before going back to sleep. The submitter stopped honking, and he and his mother sat there in shock before they started laughing at what had just happened. Nico was driving through Vegas when 3 street racers went flying past him on the highway. Before they could speed off, one sideswiped another vehicle, pushing it into a concrete barrier and sending sparks flying. Instead of stopping, the racing driver then took off. Once Nico recovered from the shock of what had happened, he called 911 and reported what he'd seen. He told us he saw multiple people stop to help the victim, who was able to safely pull over. Sadly, it seems that the driver responsible sped off into the night and was probably never held to account. Ron and Ralph were driving through Sebastian Inlet State Park in Florida when they watched another driver lose control, collide with the median barrier, then roll her car repeatedly. After the tumbling Toyota came to a stop, Ron and Ralph checked on the two occupants and discovered that neither was injured. Ron and a bystander had to pry the driver's door open so she could exit the car. Ron and Ralph provided their dashcam footage to the Florida State Trooper who responded, and they told us the highway was clear 30 minutes later. They wanted to thank Herman for buying them a dashcam. They also said they've been watching our videos on their For You page for a while, but it would mean the world to us if you'd subscribe. We appreciate the views, but clicking the subscribe button helps appease the almighty algorithm. Param was driving through an intersection with a green light when the driver of a pickup truck from his left drove through his red light, T-boning Param's Hyundai Elantra. Param hit the brakes and swerved, but it wasn't enough to avoid the collision. Incredibly, neither he nor his passenger were hurt at all. His vehicle automatically summoned first responders, but that's when things got weird. The driver of the pickup immediately began accusing Param of running a red light. Once Param told him he had a dash cam, he suddenly went completely silent. The police ended up charging the pickup driver with careless driving. Sadly, Param's Elantra was totaled by the collision, but insurance covered the value of the vehicle plus the remainder of his loan. Tia was headed to her mother-in-law's house on her day off. After waiting patiently for a traffic light to turn green, she proceeded with her left turn only to be blindsided by a speeding SUV from her left. The Infiniti SUV flew through a red light and T-boned Tia's Jetta, destroying it in the impact. Witnesses claimed the SUV driver never applied the brakes, but that isn't visible in the dashcam video. After the Jetta was totaled, Tia replaced her VW with a cloud blue-wrapped Tesla Model Y named Cindy. She told us her whole family watches our videos, and thanks to us, most of them have dashcams. Eric sent us this footage from a dashcam in a company semi-truck. Eric told us this truck was being driven by Quincy, who wasn't hurt when an oncoming semi was hit by a hydroplaning SUV, sending it into the temporary median barrier. The impact sent the Jersey barriers sliding into Quincy's lane, where they were struck by a car that had been passing Quincy's Peterbilt. The highway was shut down for cleanup, and Eric told us police responded in under 5 minutes. Tiago was driving his Mitsubishi Outlander when he turned left through an intersection. The driver of a pickup truck approaching from his left barreled through his red light and T-boned the Mercedes SUV right behind him.
I was headed for... Oh my gosh. Accident.
The speeding pickup flew past the stop bar and into turning traffic, slamming into the SUV but missing Tiago's. He said he checked the local police department's website, but nothing about the collision was reported. Tiago told us he and his son Arthur are big Wham Bam fans, and they watch our videos every Sunday. If you're a fan, make sure YouTube didn't unsubscribe you so you won't miss our weekly uploads. Watch what happened to Brad one night as he sat patiently at a red light. The driver of a white Subaru failed to slow down before slamming into the back of Brad's Subaru BRZ at high speed. Brad called emergency services, and first responders arrived within 10 minutes. Once the paramedics checked him for injuries, the police took Brad's contact info and sent him home. He told us they handled everything, including towing his wrecked car. The next day, he made a claim with his insurance provider. 5 days later, they totaled his BRZ, and 2 days after that, they deposited about $19,000 in his bank account. Brad still doesn't know what caused the collision, as the police refused to tell him anything else. What he does know is that the other vehicle's registration was canceled 2 days after the collision, so it's safe to assume it was totaled as well. Thanks to Australian privacy laws, we'll never know why the other driver didn't stop. Cody was driving with some friends in his Corolla and was waiting at a red light. When the crossing light turned yellow, an SUV from each direction raced the light and they struck each other head-on. While an SUV from the right entered the intersection during the yellow light to make a left turn, another SUV from the left ran the light the moment it turned red, slamming hard into the SUV from the right. Cody is first aid, CPR, AED certified, so he ran to check on the drivers. Thankfully, first responders arrived quickly and transported them both to the hospital. Cody told us they didn't seem seriously injured. He also told us our channel is the reason he bought a dash cam. Thanks, Cody. Dennis was driving his Honda Civic down a Texas highway with his girlfriend, who was visiting from Canada, in the passenger seat. Suddenly, a semi-truck merged into the side of them, sending the car spinning out of control. Dennis said it was unfortunate that this happened while his girlfriend was visiting, but he's thankful neither of them were seriously injured. The trucker took responsibility for the collision and said he hadn't seen Dennis's Civic. He asked for a shout out for his girlfriend Jennifer, who flew home as scheduled the day after the collision. Panda and Penguin were on their way to work one morning. We're seeing Panda's view from his Toyota RAV4, and his wife Penguin was driving the Prius just ahead of him. Shortly after Panda left the highway to head to his job, he watched an SUV hit a patch of black ice before spinning out of control and colliding with the side of an oncoming semi-truck. The front end of the white SUV was obliterated by the impact with the semi's trailer. Incredibly, no other vehicles were damaged, not even another SUV whose driver had to hop the curb to avoid getting hit. In addition to Panda, 3 other drivers stopped to render aid. The trucker let the driver of the white SUV sit in his truck to stay warm until first responders arrived. Thankfully, she wasn't seriously injured. Panda told us he provided a statement to the police as well as a copy of his dashcam footage. Our submitter told us he stopped and checked on the driver of the sedan before notifying the police of the collision. He told us the driver was crying, and he also pointed out that the driver of the SUV left the scene. Nathan was on his way home from school when another driver made an illegal left turn across his lane, and at 34 miles per hour in a 35 mile per hour zone, he slammed into the driver's side of the Honda Pilot. Police responded to the scene, and Nathan provided them with a copy of his dashcam footage to use as evidence in their investigation. The insurance company totaled his Ford Mustang after seeing the same footage. Nathan pointed out that he was using the dashcam model we recommend, and he gave it credit for the fastest insurance resolution he's ever experienced. He replaced his wrecked car with another Mustang a week later. Herb was driving in Las Vegas when he watched another driver run a red light. That's not what this clip is about, though. While Herb was waiting for the light to turn green, as one does when at a red light, an oncoming driver ignored the red light and drove straight through it, getting T-boned in the process. The vehicle kept rolling after the impact, slamming into Herb's Nissan Frontier. The Chevy was a rental and the driver was drunk. When the police came, he didn't remember running the red light and told them that he'd been run into twice. The airbags in Herb's truck had deployed and all 3 vehicles had to be towed. Fortunately, there were no major injuries. Herb asked us to shout out his wife Jessica and her friend Jennifer. They both love the Wham Bam channels and can't wait to upgrade to Teslas someday. Mark was driving a tow truck, which was pretty convenient considering what he witnessed. The driver of a pickup made a last-minute high-speed exit before briefly losing control and hitting another vehicle. Mark stopped to check on the other driver and to see if he could decipher the pickup's license plate number from his dashcam footage. Thankfully, he was able to provide it to the Minnesota State Patrol. A man waited patiently for his traffic light to turn green before proceeding through the intersection. Wait, what happened? Let's take a look at the rear camera and see if we can tell why a man's Hyundai Kona suddenly spun out of control. A Nissan Leaf driver had run a red light, T-boning E-Man's SUV hard enough to push it into the pickup truck on his right. It's not until E-Man pulls out of the intersection that we can spot the red light runner's vehicle. A patrolling police officer came across the accident scene before anybody called 911, and E-Man gave them a copy of his dashcam video. E-Man's Iron Man Edition Hyundai Kona was nearly totaled, and repairs took 3 months and $14,000 to complete. Thankfully, nobody was seriously injured. Jade was driving a Freightliner semi-truck when the driver of a car lost control while avoiding a pickup truck that had slowed down to pull over on the left side of the highway. Jade told us the driver of the pickup was stopping to see if the driver of the white car needed help. Jade had seen the driver of the gray car on his phone before losing control. Jade stopped to check on the driver, and he was fine. Luckily, Jade's trailer was empty at the time, or else the truck might have been too heavy to slow down so quickly. The driver of the white car fled the scene and was never found. Steven was waiting to turn left at a red light when he watched another driver run their red light, T-boning a car and pushing it into Steven's Trailblazer. The car that was T-boned was being driven by an elderly gentleman, and he sustained moderate injuries. Neither Steven nor the woman who had run the red light were hurt. All 3 vehicles were heavily damaged, but Steven is still waiting on repairs and doesn't know how much the final bill will be. This is just another reminder of why you should always stop at a red light, even if it has only been red for a second.
Wham Bam, we got a Patreon man. Please support the show.